Chapter 3507. Chapter 352. Chapter 352. The strongest opponent. This guy is so fierce. When the crowd saw Nye Tian, their eyes couldn't help but tremble, their expressions were shocked. Nye Tian was seriously injured, yet he still wanted to fight. Was he not afraid of death? Or did he think that Su Kuanga wouldn't dare to kill him? However, Nye Tian was still standing after 2 shots, which was already far beyond everyone's expectations. Facing an opponent like Su Kuanga, any rational person would choose to admit defeat. However, Nye Tian insisted on fighting. For him, the battle with Su Kuanga was not only a match, but also an opportunity. Su Kuanga was a good opponent that was extremely difficult to meet. If he met such an opponent and became timid, then he would really be stupid. Nye Tian, do you still want to fight? At this time, Su Kuanga took a step forward. His whole body's aura was like a rainbow, especially the Emperor's berserk song in his hand, which stood horizontally in the air, as if it wanted to suppress the world. Su Kuanga, our battle has just begun. With a faint smile, the blood at the corner of Nye Tian's mouth was wiped clean, and a strange smile appeared in his eyes. Then, with a shake of his body, all the blood on his body was washed away. Even his broken bones were healed in the blink of an eye. Seeing this scene, Su Kuanga's eyes couldn't help but tighten. He was extremely puzzled. He felt that Nye Tian's body seemed to have awakened a terrifying power, causing his martial body to instantly recover. At the same time, Lang Xi's eyes trembled. He was extremely shocked. He shouted in his heart, "Eye power!" He felt that Nye Tian's body was surging with a majestic eye power. After attacking the martial body, it caused the power of the martial body to burst out. It was extremely strange. He noticed that the eye power came from Nye Tian's other eye. This kid is actually an extremely rare dual-pupil dual variant martial artist. Lang Xi instantly understood. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, he exclaimed in his heart. He had previously found it strange that when Nye Tian defeated Ming Tai, he only used one eye. Martial artists with one eye and other pupils were very rare. As for Nye Tian, he was a dual-pupiled martial artist, but each of his eyes had awakened a different power. Double-eyed double abnormality was even rarer. At this moment, Wolf C was looking at Nye Tian with an incredulous look in his eyes. There was even a strange fanaticism in them. So far, the power that Nye Tian had displayed was too shocking. The power of the dragon vein, the power of the other pupil, the power of the Archean Saint Soul, and the terrifying sword intent. Any one of these powers would allow a cultivator to surpass other cultivators of the same level. Nye Tian, on the other hand, had so much power at the same time. No wonder he could jump levels to defeat a 9th-level heavenly charm martial artist. At this moment, Wolf C had a vague feeling that Nye Tian's body might be hiding an even more terrifying power. Nye Tian, it seems that I have underestimated you. Su Kuanga's eyes slightly sank as he spoke in a cold tone. He then took a step forward, causing the void to sink. Come. Nye Tian smiled faintly. His eyes slowly turned pitch black. It was the activation of the Fiend God body. At this time, he had activated the Fiend God body. The pressure that his martial body had to endure was unimaginably great. Not long ago, he had already activated the Fiend God body in his battle with the Forest Wolf City Lord Wunrin Tuesday. At this time, his martial body had not fully recovered. Right now, he was forcefully activating the Fiend God body while he was seriously injured. Good. Su Kuanga felt that Nye Tian's aura had changed. It aroused the fighting intent in his heart. With a low roar, a terrifying spear intent soared into the sky. This kid called Nye Tian is so terrifying. He is only at the 1st level of heavenly charm, yet he can face Su Kuanga so calmly. If he had the same strength as Su Kuanga, I'm afraid that Su Kuanga would not be his match. The crowd looked at Nye Tian, their eyes trembling as they couldn't help but say. At this time, Everyone could feel that Nye Tian's aura was much stronger than before. It seemed that Nye Tian really had the strength to fight with Su Kuanga. At this time, Helian Xingfeng was already dumbfounded. His eyes trembled and he couldn't say anything for a long time. At this moment, he truly understood how terrifying Nye Tian was. If the person standing in front of Su Kuanga was him, he wouldn't know how many times he would have died. Kill! At this time, Nye Tian's voice sounded. He actually took the initiative to attack. He swept the sword in his hand and a violent sword intent whistled out, oppressing the void and enveloping Su Kuanga. This kind of sword intent can't hurt me. Su Kuanga smiled indifferently. He raised the Emperor's berserk song. Suddenly, a peerlessly overbearing aura, like a rolling hurricane, swept everything and directly destroyed Nye Tian's sword intent. Is that so? At this time, Nye Tian sneered. In his other hand, another sword appeared. Immediately, two swords attacked at the same time. Two terrifying sword intents, in the midst of surging blood energy, fused into one. A terrifying sword shadow, carrying a destructive power, pressed towards Su Kuanga. Su Kuanga felt a violent pressure. It was overwhelming, making him feel threatened. He couldn't help but cry out in surprise. At this time, he understood that Nye Tian's previous sword was just a test. This time, when both swords attacked at the same time, it was the real killing move. Dragon's Roar! However, at this time, Su Kuanga was only surprised. He didn't panic in the slightest. His Emperor's berserk song swept out. Suddenly, there was a dragon roar in the void. Then, a dragon shadow appeared and rolled out. It actually forcibly pushed away Nye Tian's sword shadow. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. Nye Tian's figure retreated several thousand meters and then stood still. On the other hand, Su Kuanga only retreated a few steps and then stood still. However, this scene made everyone's eyes tremble. They sucked in a breath of cold air and their expressions were extremely shocked. Su Kuanga only retreated a few steps, but in the eyes of everyone, this was even more shocking than Nye Tian being seriously injured. Su Kuanga actually retreated. Su Kuanga, who was known as the strongest holy disciple, was repelled by a first-stage heaven rhythm martial artist. How could such a scene not be shocking? Good. Very good. At this time, Su Kuanga suddenly raised his head. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He stared at Nye Tian and said in a cold tone, Nye Tian, you are the strongest opponent I, Su Kuanga, have ever met in my life. The strongest opponent. At this time, Su Kuanga could be considered to have taken Nye Tian seriously. Although Nye Tian had blocked two of his spears, at that time, Nye Tian was still being beaten. And now, Nye Tian took the initiative to attack and even forced him to retreat a few steps. This made him have no choice but to look at this battle and Nye Tian in a new light. Su Kuanga had met many people who were stronger than him, but Nye Tian was the only one who truly made him feel threatened. Even if he was arrogant, he had to admit that if Nye Tian was in the same realm as him, he would definitely not be Nye Tian's opponent. Because of this, he said that Nye Tian was his strongest opponent. Should I feel honored? Nye Tian faintly smiled, the corner of his mouth pulled into a calm arc. He still remembered what Su Kuanga said before the battle. To be able to fight with him was the glory of Nye Tian's life. Nye Tian, you are worthy of me using my true strength, Su Kuanga said with a gloomy face. Immediately, a mysterious aura surged from his body. Then, from his fingertips, several streams of blood qi gushed out and poured into the golden dragon carving above the Emperor's berserk song. In the next moment, a strange scene happened. Chapter 3508. Golden Dragon Slayer, huh? Nye Tian saw the scene above the Emperor's berserk song and his eyes darkened in surprise. At this moment, he actually felt an incomparably vigorous blood meridian aura. Emperor's berserk song, Golden Dragon Slayer. At the same time, Lang Si saw this scene and his eyes trembled in shock. He never thought that Su Kuanga would be this terrifying, using his own blood chi to awaken the golden dragon seal above the Emperor's berserk song, Golden Dragon Seal. It turned out that the golden dragon carving above the Emperor's berserk song was a Khanate spear seal, Golden Dragon Seal. The Golden Dragon Slayer was the power of the Spear Emperor's Su family's bloodline. It existed in different forms in the Su family's bloodline, and Su Kuanga's Golden Dragon Slayer existed above his Yuan Soul Spear, Emperor's berserk song, in the form of a Golden Dragon Seal. Therefore, Su Kuanga's Emperor's berserk song was actually a primordial spirit bloodline. However, the Golden Dragon Slayer bloodline was extremely powerful. Many of the Su family's warriors had the Golden Dragon Slayer bloodline, but only a few could actually awaken the Golden Dragon Slayer. At such a young age, Su Kuanga was able to awaken the Golden Dragon Slayer with blood chi. It was truly terrifying. Roar. At this time, above the Emperor's berserk song, a majestic dragon roar resounded. Immediately after, a golden dragon appeared in the world. It was like a golden streamer surging in the void. It was like a guardian god, twining around Su Kuanga's body. The Golden Dragon Slayer's body was not big, only a dozen meters long, but the dragon chi around it was extremely terrifying, vigorous and violent, as if there was an abyss of dragon chi within its body. Could this be the Su family's bloodline power, Golden Dragon Slayer? The crowd looked at the Golden Dragon Slayer, their eyes trembling, the shock in their hearts was written on their faces. No one expected that Su Kuanga would actually use the Golden Dragon Slayer at this moment. It's over. The moment Wenren Xiang saw the Golden Dragon Slayer, her beautiful eyes could not help but tremble. Her heart that was hanging in suspense fell to the bottom. She originally thought that there was some hope for Nie Tian, but Su Kuanga's Golden Dragon Slayer instantly made her despair. The Su family's bloodline power was renowned throughout the entire Night Wolf Mountain. Even if Su Kuanga could not display the true power of the Golden Dragon Punisher, it was still not something that Nie Tian could contend against. At this moment, the path before Nie Tian was to admit defeat or die. Su Kuanga, Forest Wolf City admits defeat. In the next moment, Wenren Xiang didn't wait for Su Kuanga to make a move and directly shouted. Everyone was stunned, and they looked at Wenren Xiang in astonishment. Could it be that Forest Wolf City was really going to admit defeat just like this? I won't admit defeat. But at this moment, Nie Tian's voice sounded. It was very calm, but it carried an inviolable intent. He had fought countless people and had never admitted defeat. Even if Su Kuanga's Death Punisher Golden Dragon was terrifying, it was not enough for him to directly admit defeat. Nie Tian, you. Wenren Xiang's beautiful eyes trembled. Looking at Nie Tian from afar, she was speechless. She didn't understand why Nie Tian was still persevering. Continue the battle. At this moment, Wolf C's voice sounded low and powerful. His eyes looked at Wenren Xiang, obviously threatening the latter to retreat. Wenren Xiang's pretty face froze. It was extremely ugly. At this moment, she felt a strong sense of despair. It seemed that she could only watch as Nie Tian died. Nie Tian, your talent and strength are far beyond my expectations. However, no one can stop me from walking on my path. At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and said indifferently. In his calm voice, there was arrogance and confidence. Nie Tian's path also cannot be stopped. Nie Tian looked at Su Kuanga and responded with a faint smile. Good. Su Kuanga's eyes trembled. Feeling Nie Tian's sharp aura, he laughed and said, Then let's use the last move to decide the winner. As you wish. With a faint smile, Nie Tian's face grew grim as 9 shackles of the Tao of the Heavens appeared around him. Like 9 giant snakes, they floated in midair. At the same time, he unleashed his sword intent madly, causing the surrounding void to tremble. Nie Tian, if you only have your original strength, you won't be able to fight against me. Su Kwanga let out a hollow laugh as the Ni Punisher Golden Dragon uttered a roar, causing his aura to skyrocket like a raging wave, causing the space to vibrate under the pressure. However, Nye Tian did not speak at this moment. He closed his eyes, as if he had entered a mysterious state. Su Kwanga's eyes trembled slightly upon seeing this, then he said in a cold tone, "No matter what you want to do, I won't give you a chance." He respected Nye Tian as a real opponent, but he would not be lenient. This was a battle of victory, but also a battle of reputation. The reputation of the Spear Emperor's clan could not be tarnished. Dragon against the 9 heavens, kill! The next moment, Su Kwanga let out a low roar. Suddenly, all the spear intent in his body surged wildly. The endless spear aura instantly condensed in the void, turning into a golden dragon shadow, wrapping around the Ni executing golden dragon and crazily pressing forward. Boom! At this moment, the void roared, as if it was about to collapse. Ni executing golden dragon, so terrifying! The eyes of the crowd trembled violently. Su Kwanga had awakened the Ni executing golden dragon, and his aura had skyrocketed several times. With his current strength, it was enough to kill a warrior in the heavenly mandate realm. Roar! The golden dragon roared violently, pressing towards Nye Tian. At this moment, Nye Tianling stood in the void, feeling the power of the 9 heavenly shackles. In his body, a strange aura of heaven and earth surged, as if a sleeping giant beast was slowly being awakened. Nye Tian, you want to use the power of the heavenly way to stimulate the power of the heart of the sky. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor suddenly came to his senses, his eyes trembled, and he exclaimed in his heart. Nye Tian was too crazy, he was basically gambling with his life. After Nye Tian merged with the heart of the sky, he felt that the heart of the sky seemed to be silent. At this moment, he was about to use the power of the heavenly way to awaken the heart of the sky. As long as the heart of the sky was awakened, Nye Tian's sword principle realm could definitely break through. Only with a breakthrough in sword principle could he possibly compete with the Ni executing golden dragon. However, it was too crazy for Nye Tian to choose to awaken the heart of the sky at this time. That kid, has he given up? The crowd looked at Nye Tian, their eyes trembling, and said one after another, "Boom!" But at this moment, a terrifying power was released from Nye Tian's body, turning into a colorful ripple in the air, extremely mysterious. The heart of the sky is about to awaken. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor seemed to have noticed something, his eyes trembled, and he exclaimed, "This is how." At the same time, Wolf C's eyes trembled, and he was stunned for a moment. He said in a daze, "How, the heart of the sky?" He was completely shocked, feeling a roar in his head, as if he was about to faint. Chapter 3509. The Awakening of the Sky. The Master of the Sky. Nye Tian was actually the Master of the Sky. Wolf C's eyes were aghast, the corner of his mouth twitched, as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He had never thought that Nye Tian was the Master of the Sky who had merged with the heart of the sky. Wolf C was well aware of the forces behind the heart of the sky. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel a strong fear towards Nye Tian. Boom! At this time, Nye Tian's body once again released a powerful aura, stirring up a terrible storm in the air. Under the impact of this power, the void actually slightly stagnated, as if it was still for a moment. Huh! Su Kwanga saw this scene. His eyes couldn't help but narrow, he was very surprised. He actually felt a strong sense of threat from the fluctuations in the void. What is going on? The crowd was also shocked by the scene in front of them, their eyes trembling, not knowing what was going on. That kid, his body seems to have awakened a power, it's getting stronger and stronger. A warrior with good perception looked at Nye Tian from afar and said in horror. At this time, in Nye Tian's body, there was indeed a power awakening, it was the power of the heart of the sky. Under the stimulation of this power, his martial body became stronger again. More importantly, the sword intent in his body was becoming more violent, as if it was boiling. The heart of the sky was originally formed by the sword intent of the heaven and earth, and it also had another name, Heaven and Earth Sword Heart, comprehending the Tao of heaven and earth, containing the heaven and earth sword heart. Kill! Su Kuanga felt the aura of Nie Tian's body was crazily soaring. He couldn't help but tremble. He let out a low roar. Boom! Suddenly, the golden dragon in the void pressed down on Nie Tian. The heaven and earth shook, dark clouds rolled, as if it was about to collapse. However, at this moment, Nie Tian was like a boulder standing in the middle of a raging storm, not moving a single inch. In the next moment, the golden dragon pressed down, as if it was going to swallow Nie Tian in the next moment. Boom! At that moment, Nie Tian's eyes snapped open, and a terrifying sword aura shot up into the sky. It was as if a giant had suddenly risen to his feet, and the aura it emanated seemed capable of shaking everything in its path, as if it were going to trample the heavens and trample the earth. Saint Heaven-defying sword, unity of heaven and man, Yang's sacrifice. In the next moment, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he murmured. His calm voice was filled with a domineering, killing intent that could destroy everything. In that moment, the heart of the sky within Nie Tian awoke. His sword realm, stimulated by the heart of the sky, had finally broken through and reached the realm of sword rhythm. The most direct result of the breakthrough in the sword realm was that he could use the second combination move of the sacred heaven-defying sword, unity of heaven and man, Yang Chen sacrifice. Previously, he could only use one with earth, sinking stars and moon. Only when using dual swords could he use the move of heaven and earth as one. However, that kind of combination move was only using two sword moves at the same time. It wasn't a real combination move. Now that Nie Tian had broken through his sword realm, the Yang Chen sacrifice was the real combination move. Boom! In the next instant, a gigantic sword silhouette soared into the sky, like a gigantic dragon rushing towards the heavens. It exuded an aura that could shake the heavens, as though it wanted to destroy everything in its path. The four types of space sunk slightly as the two energies collided head-on. Boom! In the void, a terrifying explosion was heard as the terrifying and violent forces collided with each other, causing the space to tremble violently. One sword and one dragon collided with each other, causing a terrifying force to erupt, as if the heavens and earth were going to be destroyed. The crowd looked at the scene in front of them in shock. Their eyes trembled as they gasped. They didn't expect this battle to be so intense. If Su Kuanga's terrifying force was within everyone's expectations, then the force displayed by Nie Tian was completely out of everyone's expectations. Nie Tian was only in Heavenly Aura Stage 1. How could the force in his body be so powerful? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The eyes of the crowd trembled. Ear-piercing rumbling sounds were constantly heard in the sky. This was the result of the two forces consuming each other. In the void, streams of turbulence surged out crazily, as if thousands of demons were dancing wildly. Boom, 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 boom. A moment later, a terrifying explosion was heard, followed by a shocking scene. The giant golden dragon couldn't withstand it and collapsed. A terrifying force instantly collapsed and spread in all directions like a tsunami that wanted to annihilate everything. In the next moment, the huge sword shadow streaked across the sky and rushed towards Su Kuanga. The crowd's eyes trembled. At this moment, their hearts were in their throats. The sword shadow's momentum was too powerful. It seemed like it wanted to destroy everything. Could it be that Su Kuanga was going to be killed? Su Kuanga's eyes trembled as he suddenly felt the aura of death. He wanted to resist, but he found that the sword intent in the void had sealed the space, making it difficult for him to even lift the Emperor's berserk song. At this moment, he felt a wave of demonic energy, a dark aura. That aura seemed like it wanted to resist everything, trample on everything, and destroy everything. At this moment, Su Kuanga knew that he had lost and that he would have to pay with his life. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that the sword aura that was coming towards him was inexplicably weaker, causing his eyes to tremble. Then, he instantly seized the opportunity and used the Emperor's Berserk song again. A terrifying storm appeared where the tip of the spear was pointing, strangling towards the void. Bang! In the next moment, after a muffled sound, Su Kuanga's figure retreated a few hundred meters and then stood firmly. There was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. He was only slightly injured. He stabilized his body and looked towards the distant sky. Nie Tianling was standing there with the raging wind, like a sword god. The crowd looked at Nie Tian, then looked at Su Kuanga. They were stunned for a long time, unable to react. Just now, when Su Kuanga was about to be killed, why was he able to counterattack and eliminate the killing intent? Su Kuanga, this battle is over. At this time, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth slightly raised as he spoke indifferently. You win. Su Kuanga frowned and replied solemnly. He lost to Nie Tian. At the last moment, Nie Tian withdrew his hand in time, which was why he was still standing there. If Nie Tian did not stop, he would have been a corpse by now. He was very confused as to why Nie Tian did not kill him. Su Kuanga lost? When the crowd heard Su Kuanga's words, their eyes couldn't help but tremble. They were shocked on the spot as they looked at Nie Tian with unimaginable shock. Who would have thought that Su Kuanga, one of the 9 wolves of Wolf Night and known as the strongest saint disciple, would be defeated by a first-level heaven rhythm martial artist? Such a scene, if they did not see it with their own eyes, they would not be able to believe it. Why didn't you kill me? At this time, Su Kuanga suddenly raised his head, looked at Nie Tian and asked. He did not understand why Nie Tian stopped at the last moment. If it was him, he would not be lenient if he had the chance to kill Nie Tian. Chapter 35:10. Concealing killing intent. What we are fighting for is victory and defeat, not life and death. Su Kuanga's eyes trembled as he repeated Nie Tian's words. His complexion was extremely ugly. It was just a simple sentence, but it made him feel too ashamed to show his face. Some people, or most people, could kill for the sake of victory or defeat. However, Nie Tian didn't. He stopped after the match was over. At this time, Nie Tian's face was indifferent and very calm. He did not kill Su Kuanga because he felt that the latter was a very rare martial arts genius, especially his spear Dao talent, which could be called peerless. But unfortunately, he met the even more peerless Nie Tian. Nie Tian was able to defeat Su Kuanga purely because his own strength had exceeded the limit. In the state of the fiend god body, he used the power of the heavens to stimulate and awaken the heart of the sky. With the help of the awakening of the heart of the sky, he drove the breakthrough of the sword realm. The moment the sword realm broke through, Nie Tian's sword intent displayed extraordinary power. Only at that moment, he was able to release such a terrifying power. If he continued to fight with Su Kuanga now, he would most likely lose. Therefore, not killing Su Kuanga was actually a gamble on Su Kuanga's character. If at this moment, Su Kuanga did not admit defeat and the two continued to fight, it would be very troublesome. But Nie Tian believed in his own vision. A person with pure spear intent would disdain to continue fighting after being defeated. Today's defeat, Su Kuanga will never forget it. After a moment, Su Kuanga calmed down, looked at Nie Tian and slightly bowed, as if to thank him. A momentary victory and defeat is nothing. Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. Su Kuanga slightly nodded and did not say much. At this time, everyone's sluggish expression finally reacted. The shock in their hearts could not be relieved for a long time. Su Kuanga was unexpectedly defeated by Nie Tian. This was something that everyone could not accept. Even if Su Kuanga personally admitted it, everyone could not accept it. Especially the people present, they were all martial artists of Songlang City. Many people even thought that Su Kuanga did not use his full strength. At least now, he was not injured, he could still fight and continue to fight. On the other hand, Nie Tian's face was pale, his strength was almost consumed. Su Kuanga, do you really want to admit defeat? At this time, Wolf C's low voice sounded. His eyes were deep as he looked at Su Kuanga and asked meaningfully. Of course, he could see what had happened, but Su Kuanga could not admit defeat and continue to fight. He had already sensed that Nie Tian's aura was unstable, and that he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Wolf C. Su Kuanga looked at Wolf C and naturally understood what the latter was hinting at. He faintly smiled and calmly said, "A loss is a loss. I, Su Kuanga, can't afford to lose." Lang Si frowned, his complexion was somewhat ugly, then he sneered. His gaze swept across the people of Song Lang City and said, "Su Kuanga, you can afford to lose, but can Song Lang City afford to lose? Song Lang City sent me to fight, they should have thought of the consequences." Su Kuanga's eyes slightly narrowed, his eyes swept across the people of Song Lang City, and said loudly, "Today's defeat is because I, Su Kuanga, have failed Song Lang City. If Song Lang City wants to punish me, Su Kuanga will bear it without complaint. But if you want Su Kuanga to go against his heart of martial arts, it is impossible." His magnanimous voice reverberated in everyone's ears like a thunderclap. The people of Song Lang City looked at Su Kuanga, they were stunned and did not know what to say. "Brother Su, today's defeat, I also have a part in it. After we return, if the city lord wants to punish me, I am willing to bear it with you." At this time, Ming Tai came forward and said loudly. Su Kuanga looked at Ming Tai, nodded slightly, and did not say anything. The people of Song Lang City were stunned once again, speechless. "Very good." Just at this moment, Wolf C's voice rang out again. He sneered and said, "Su Kuanga, Ming Tai, since you want to hand over the ice and fire spirit springs to the Forest Wolf City, this Wolf C will naturally not stop you. Now, this Lang Si announces that the winner of this battle of ice and fire is Sin Lang City." With these words, he looked at Nie Tian with a frosty look in his eyes, filled with killing intent. Phew! When Nie Tian heard Lang Si's words, the corner of his mouth twitched, he let out a long breath of impure air, and his tense nerves immediately relaxed. The battle between ice and fire had finally come to an end. In the distance, Wenren Xiang was stunned. She wanted to say something but could not. She really suspected that she was dreaming, everything seemed so unreal. Sun Lang City actually won. This time, the intensity of the battle of ice and fire far exceeded Wenren Xiang's expectations. If not for Nie Tian, Sun Lang City would not have won. It was no exaggeration to say that Nie Tian completely reversed the situation with his own strength. Helian Qingfeng's face was stiff, his entire person like a wax statue. After a long time, he reacted, not knowing whether to be happy or sad. At this time, the gaze he looked at Nie Tian did not have resentment, only fear and dread. After this battle, he finally understood how big the gap between him and Nie Tian was. "Miss Wenren, let's go." At this time, Nie Tian's figure moved, directly arriving beside Wenren Xiang, preparing to leave. "Okay." Wenren Xiang nodded slightly, took a step forward, slightly bowed to Lang Si and said, "Lord Lang Si, since this battle of ice and fire is over, this junior will take her leave." "Okay." Lang Si's face was gloomy, he did not say anything, only nodding. His eyes were secretly locked on Nie Tian, the hidden killing intent almost unable to be concealed, but there was some hesitation in his eyes, as if he was afraid of something. He really wanted to kill Nie Tian, because the latter had too much heaven-defying power. But Nie Tian was the lord of the sky, this identity made him afraid. Just now, he instigated Su Kuanga to continue fighting, in fact, he wanted to borrow the latter's hand to kill Nie Tian. But Su Kuanga was very principled, and did not continue fighting. Lang Si was afraid of Nie Tian's identity, but if he had to watch the latter leave, his heart was really unwilling. At this time, Lang Si suddenly looked at Nie Tian, his gaze slightly sinking, and asked, Nie Tian, in half a month, the Wolf Knight competition will begin. Are you interested in participating? I'm not interested, Nie Tian said with a smile. In Lang Si's eyes, he felt a strong killing intent. The latter invited him to participate in the Wolf Knight competition, obviously not with good intentions. Huh! Lang Si's eyes narrowed, his old face became gloomy again. And at this time the others were also stunned, extremely surprised. No one thought that Lang Si would invite Nie Tian to participate in the Wolf Knight competition. What was even more unexpected was that Nie Tian actually refused. One must know that the Wolf Knight competition was the most important martial arts competition of the Wolf Knight Mountain. Only the most talented warriors were qualified to participate. Just like among all the warriors present, only Su Kuanga and Ming Tai were qualified to participate. Let's go. Nie Tian ignored Lang Si's reaction, directly turned around and left. Nie Tian. But at this time, Lang Si's voice sounded again, and then he waved his hand, throwing something to Nie Tian. Nie Tian suddenly turned around, stretched out his hand, and caught a black token with a wolf's head carved on it. Chapter 35:11. Chapter 356. Chapter 356. Where are they? Wolf Knight token. Everyone looked at the token in Nie Tian's hand and couldn't help but tremble in shock. It was hard to believe that Wolf Si had given Nie Tian a Wolf Knight token. The Wolf Knight token was the proof for a warrior to participate in the Wolf Knight contest. Under normal circumstances, warriors who participated in the Wolf Knight contest had to go through many rounds of selection before they could obtain the Wolf Knight token. Only extremely talented warriors like Su Kuanga could obtain the Wolf Knight token directly. However, Wolf Si had actually given Nie Tian a Wolf Knight token. How could everyone not be surprised? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. Looking at the Wolf Knight token in his hand, he faintly smiled and said, Lord Wolf Si, what do you mean by this? You are not interested in the Wolf Knight contest now, but it won't be long before you become interested. Wolf Si smiled strangely and said, Take the Wolf Knight token first. When you change your mind, you can take the Wolf Knight token and come to Wolf Knight City. If that's the case, then I will respectfully accept. Nie Tian thought for a moment, faintly smiled and then put away the Wolf Knight token. Brother Nie, I hope that you can participate in the Wolf Knight contest. If there is a chance, I will ask you again. At this time, Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and said with a faint smile. Yeah. Nie Tian nodded, but didn't comment further. Then, they didn't stay any longer and immediately left. 3 figures, like flowing lights, disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. Brother Su, is this person really that terrifying? Ming Tai looked in the direction where Nie Tian and the others disappeared, his eyes slightly trembling as he said in a deep voice. I, Su Kuanga, also consider myself a martial arts genius, but compared to him, my talent is like the difference between heaven and earth. Su Kuanga said in a deep voice, but his eyes were not dim at all. Instead, they were filled with sharpness. The more powerful the opponent, the more excited he felt. If all the warriors in this world were mediocre, then it would be too boring. Nie Tian, will you come to the Night of Wolves to fight for supremacy? On the other side, Wolf Si stared at the sky with a strange expression on his face. At the same time, in the void outside Song Lang City. Pooh! Nie Tian stood in the air, but his body suddenly trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Nie Tian, are you all right? Seeing this, Wenren Xiang's pretty face couldn't help but stiffen. She seemed to be very flustered. Helian Shringfeng was also stunned for a moment. His expression was a little strange. I'm fine. Nie Tian took a deep breath. Although he said that he was fine, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper, without the slightest trace of blood. He was already severely injured before. Then, he activated the Godfiend body. Coupled with the awakening of the heart of the sky, it had a huge impact on his martial body, causing his injuries to become even more serious. Just now, beside Su Kwanga and the others, he had been holding his breath, not daring to reveal his injuries. At this moment, when he was at a place with no one around, he spat out a mouthful of blood from his chest. Wenren Xiang sensed Nie Tian's aura. Although it was a little weak, it was very stable. Only then did she let out a sigh of relief. Let's go back. Nie Tian slightly raised his head, his gloomy gaze swept across Helian Qingfeng's body, and said faintly. Helian Qingfeng suddenly felt a fatal threat. He was so scared that cold sweat directly seeped out of his forehead. Just now, when he saw that Nie Tian was seriously injured, he did have some thoughts. However, a glance from Nie Tian completely dispelled his thoughts. He saw with his own eyes that Nie Tian, in a seriously injured state, defeated Su Kwanga. Although it seemed that Nie Tian was seriously injured, who knew what other heaven-defying methods he had? In fact, at this moment, Nie Tian had indeed reached his limit. If Helian Qingfeng were to take action, it would be very troublesome. With Nie Tian's current state, it would take at least a few days for him to completely recover. Half a day later, Nie Tian and the others returned to Sen Lang City. In the main hall of the city lord's residence, Wenren Tu sat on the main seat. Ha ha ha! After listening to Wenren Xiang talk about the battle of ice and fire, Wenren Tu laughed wildly. He was obviously very happy. He said, I didn't expect that after so many years, my Sen Lang City finally took back the ice and fire springs. Xiang the three of you are my Sen Lang City's great heroes. Father, this time's battle of ice and fire is all Nie Tian's credit. He single-handedly defeated the 3 fighters from Sen Lang City. Wenren Xiang nodded slightly and said with a solemn expression, Is that so? Wenren too was taken aback for a moment, but the look in his eyes was a little strange. Then, he laughed and asked, Xiang quickly tell father, who are the people that Song Lang City sent to fight this time? Su Kwanga from the Su family, Ming Tai from the Ming family, and another fighter. Wenren Xiang nodded and replied, Su Kwanga, Ming Tai. When Wenren Tu heard these 2 names, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He was extremely shocked. He suddenly turned to look at Nie Tian and said in horror, Nie Tian, you really defeated Su Kwanga and Ming Tai? He originally thought that Sen Lang City was careless this time and sent out some weak fighters. He didn't expect that there would be 2 genius fighters. Especially Su Kwanga. He had the reputation of being the god of spears and was known as the strongest holy disciple. He was also one of the top geniuses of the 9 wolves. Such a character was actually defeated by Nie Tian. It was really inconceivable. I was just lucky. Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. His face was calm. Wenren Tu's eyes trembled. He was extremely shocked. Of course, he knew that to be able to defeat Su Kwanga and Ming Tai was definitely not as simple as luck. City Lord, I'm a little injured and need to rest. I'll take my leave first. Nie Tian didn't say anything more. He stood up and was ready to go back to rest. Good, good, good. Wenren Tu repeatedly agreed. His eyes flickered and he looked relieved. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and walked out. However, when he walked to the door, he suddenly stopped. He turned to look at Wenren Tu and said with a smile, City Lord, I want to see my friends first. Wenren Tu was stunned for a moment. His face flashed with an ugly expression. He immediately returned to normal and said with a smile, Nie Tian, you've just come back. It's too tiring. Moreover, you're injured. You should take a good rest. When your injuries are better, it won't be too late to see them. I want to see them now. Nie Tian's eyes sank. His expression changed in an instant. His tone also became a lot tougher. When Ren Tu saw that Nie Tian's expression changed, he couldn't help but frown. His expression became ugly. Nie Tian's heart sank as he asked, What's going on, City Lord? A murderous aura appeared in his eyes. Just now, he noticed that there was something wrong with Wenren-Tu's eyes. He was avoiding him from time to time. He deliberately asked Duanmu Lu and the others. Wenren-Tu actually panicked. Wenren-Tu frowned. He couldn't say anything. Chapter 35:12. Demonic Moon Wolf in the hall. Nie Tian's expression suddenly changed, causing the atmosphere in the hall to become strange and oppressive. Nie Tian, don't be agitated, listen to me slowly. Wenren-Tu looked at Nie Tian and panicked, his voice trembling. Where are they? Nie Tian's gaze was gloomy as he spoke word by word. His entire aura changed, revealing a chilling intent. I can't tell you. Wenren-Tu looked at Nie Tian and said coldly with a gloomy expression. I must know. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He took a step forward, shattering the bluestone floor beneath his feet. A sword aura surged from his body, and a demonic aura surged from his eyes. It was extremely terrifying. Nie Tian, I don't want to kill you, don't force me. Wenren-Tu clenched his fists and said in a deep voice with his hands behind his back. Kill me. Nie Tian's gaze changed again. The blood in his body seemed to be boiling as he asked coldly, I risked my life to help Forest Wolf City retrieve the Ice and Fire Spirit Spring, but you want to kill me? I don't want to kill you, don't force me. Wenren-Tu's expression was gloomy and murderous intent was surging in his eyes. I'm forcing you? Nie Tian frowned as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. His breathing suddenly became heavy as he said, I gave my friend to you, and now he's gone. I'm asking for you, but you say I'm forcing you? So, if I don't care about my friend's life or death, then I'm not forcing you? Wenren-Tu, if you don't hand over my friend today, I'll destroy Forest Wolf City. His deep voice was filled with undisguised, murderous intent. Destroy Forest Wolf City? Wenren-Tu looked at Nie Tian and sneered. Nie Tian, how arrogant of you! What makes you think you can destroy my Forest Wolf City by yourself? You can try. Nie Tian's eyes were as cold as ice. He took a step forward and the violent sword aura around him almost caused the entire hall to collapse. However, he didn't make a move. He didn't want to completely fall out with Wenren-Tu until the last moment. Father, what's going on? At this time, Wenren-Xiang stood up and asked. Nie Tian, you should leave now. Wenren-Tu's face was gloomy. He ignored Wenren-Xiang and looked at Nie Tian instead, saying, Your friends, just consider them dead. Where are they? Nie Tian's gaze trembled. He could no longer restrain himself. With a low roar, a wave of sword chi soared into the sky. With a loud bang, the main hall directly collapsed. The huge boulders were directly crushed into dust by the violent sword chi. Wenren-Tu's expression changed as he was shocked. He did not expect Nie Tian's aura to be this terrifying. Wenren-Xiang and Helian Qingfeng were also dumbfounded, looking at Nie Tian with blank and shocked expressions. Not long ago, Nie Tian was seriously injured. In just half a day, he had actually recovered to this extent. Wenren-Tu, I'll ask you one last time. Where are my friends? Nie Tian's eyes shone with a cold light, and a dark aura could be vaguely seen surging within them. It was very terrifying and gave people a feeling of great pressure. Wenren-Tu looked at Nie Tian and his eyes trembled. He actually felt a strong threat, causing his mind to tremble. Nie Tian was so frightening that it made him shiver with fear. Father, speak. Wenren-Xiang knew how terrifying Nie Tian was. He didn't want Nie Tian to fall out with the Forest Wolf City. His forehead was covered in cold sweat as he shouted. Father, speak quickly. Helian Qingfeng was also anxious and nodded heavily. If Nie Tian and Wenren-Tu fell out, he would also suffer. It's demonic Moon Wolf's people. Wenren-Tu hesitated for a long time before he finally spoke. Demonic Moon Wolf. Wenren-Xiang and Helian Qingfeng, after hearing this name, both exclaimed in shock. They looked panic-stricken, as if they had heard something very terrifying. What's an evil moon heavenly wolf? Nie Tian asked in a deep voice. The master of the Wolf's Night Mountain. Wenren Tu nodded. His expression was very ugly. Nie Tian, the force behind the heart-devouring blackstone that you are looking for is demonic moon wolf. Wenren Xiang looked at Nie Tian and said, Demonic moon wolf controls the entire Wolf's Night Mountain. All the forces here have to listen to demonic moon wolf. Nie Tian's expression was gloomy. His eyes were dark and surging with a cold light. So the force behind the heart-devouring blackstone that he was looking for was demonic moon wolf. After a long time, Nie Tian looked at Wenren Tu and asked coldly, Demonic moon wolf's people, why do they want to capture my friends? Wenren Tu's gaze trembled and involuntarily flickered. After hesitating for a long time, he said, I found evil moon wolf's people. Your friends are quite talented, so I gave them to evil moon wolf's people. What? After hearing Wenren Tu's words, Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank and turned crimson. He roared like a wild beast and took a step forward. He came to Wenren Tu's side. His hand stretched out like an iron pincer and tightly gripped the latter's neck. Nie Tian, Wenren Tu was not prepared at all. He immediately fell into a dead end. The pressure from Nie Tian's hand made him unable to speak. At this time, as long as Nie Tian directly exerted force, he could easily snap his neck. Nie Tian, don't. At the same time, Wenren Xiang screamed, frightened until her little face turned pale. Helian Qingfeng was similarly stunned, unable to speak. No one would have thought that Nie Tian would suddenly have such an action. Why did you do this? I, Nie Tian, risked my life to win back the Ice and Fire Spirit Springs for Forest Wolf City. Is this how you repay me? Nie Tian's eyes were murderous. He stared fixedly at Wenren Tu, his hands trembling. He was going to kill Wenren Tu in the next instant. He staked his life for the battle of ice and fire. But Wenren Tu actually took advantage of his absence to let demonic moon wolf's people capture Duanmu and the rest. How could this not make him furious? Nie Tian, I beg you, don't kill my father. At this time, Wenren Xiang suddenly knelt down, tears streaming down her face. Ah! Nie Tian turned around and glanced at Wenren Xiang, then immediately roared like a wild beast, but his hand slowly loosened. In the end, he still did not kill Wenren Tuesday. Wenren Tu instantly broke free, panting heavily a few times. The gaze he looked at Nie Tian was extremely fearful. In that instant just now, in Nie Tian's hands, he was desperate and helpless like a little lamb. Wenren Tu, I'll leave your life here first. If anything happens to my friends, I will definitely kill you. Nie Tian looked at Wenren Tu and said word by word. Yes, 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 yes. Wenren Tu gulped and nodded repeatedly like a pug. How was there any semblance of a city lord? Tell me now, what the hell is going on? Nie Tian's gaze was deep and cold as he asked. NN. Wenren Tu nodded repeatedly and said, I gave them to demonic moon wolf's people to remove the forest wolf curse mark on my body. My forest wolf curse mark can't be suppressed anymore. If I still don't remove it, I'll die without a doubt. As he spoke, Wenren Tu lifted his back, revealing a back riddled with holes. Chapter 35:13. Chapter 358. Chapter 358 Night of the Wolf. Nie Tian saw the wound on Wenren Tu's back, and couldn't help but frown. Bloody wounds covered Wenren Tu's back. They were so deep that his bones could be seen. It was a ghastly sight to see his flesh tumbling about. Most shocking of it all was that a layer of black-colored talisman markings surged on the wound, and it carried a dense baleful aura and the pungent smell of blood. It wasn't hard to imagine what kind of torture Wenren Tu had to endure every day with such a wound. Father, this. Wenren Xiang's bright eyes were trembling, and they were clearly filled with tears. She was momentarily speechless. She didn't know that Wenren Tu was suffering this kind of torture every day. Xiang, I'm fine. Wenren Tu tidied up his clothes, forced a smile and said, The forest wolf curse has been suppressed. It's just a little painful, but it won't kill me yet. Father, Wenren Xiang's eyes trembled while her tears couldn't help but flow out in the end, and she sobbed endlessly. In order to remove the forest wolf curse mark, you gave my friend to evil moon wolf's people, right? Nie Tian looked at Wenren Tu and asked coldly. Yes. Wenren Tu nodded heavily and said with a bitter face, my forest wolf curse seal was only suppressed, but not removed. He had indeed given Duanmu Lu and the others to Evil Moon Wolf as an exchange. Evil Moon Wolf needed these young and talented warriors. Unfortunately, Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf's people did not remove his forest wolf curse mark. They only helped him temporarily suppress it. Nie Tian's expression was gloomy. After a long time, he asked, your forest wolf curse mark was left behind by Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf's people? The forest wolf curse mark was indeed very terrifying. When Nie Tian first met Wenren Tu and fought with him, he knew that if not for Wenren Xiang appearing, he and Wenren Tu would have been in great danger. Nie Tian estimated that the forest wolf curse mark was similar to his holy soul curse mark from before. While it allowed the martial artist to possess powerful strength, it also caused great pressure on the martial artist. As the forest wolf curse seal became more and more powerful, the growth of Wenren Tu's martial body couldn't be compared to it, and he couldn't bear it anymore. Yes. Wenren Tu's expression was gloomy as he nodded and said, Night Wolf Mountain has 19 cities, and each city lord has a seal bestowed by Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf. Demonic Moon Sky Wolf used this method to rule Wolf's Night Mountain? Nie Tian frowned and asked coldly. Wenren Tu nodded again and said, Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf calls us, who have been cursed, wolf slaves. The 19 cities of the Night Wolf Mountain are like 19 fortresses that surround and protect the entire Night Wolf Mountain. Nie Tian's face was gloomy as he understood many things in his heart. Clearly, Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf's people were just using these city lords as slaves to guard Wolf Night Mountain. In order to make these slaves obedient, the city lords of the 19 cities were cursed. Few outsiders come to Wolf Night Mountain. At this time, Wenren Tu looked at Nie Tian and said, Your friends are very young and extremely talented. They are the people that Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf needs as wolf slaves. I thought that if I handed them over, Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf would help me remove the curse seal. Nie Tian's expression suddenly changed and he said in a low voice, You said that my friends will become wolf slaves? Yes. Wenren Tu nodded with an ugly expression. Nie Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. After a long silence he asked, Where were they captured? Wolf Night Mountain City. Wenren Tu answered subconsciously, but then he realized that something was wrong and hurriedly said, Nie Tian, you can't go to Wolf Night Mountain City. Your friends have already become wolf slaves. You can't save them. If you go, you will only lose your life in vain. When were they captured? Nie Tian's face was cold. He ignored Wenren Tu's persuasion and asked coldly. Wenren Tu's expression was ugly. He hesitated for a moment and said, About half a day ago. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and his eyes swept over Wenren Tuesday. He left Wolf Night Mountain City only a day ago. In other words, as soon as he left, Wenren Tu informed Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf's people. No wonder Wenren Tu asked Nie Tian to leave Duanmu Lu and the others in the city. It turned out that everything had been planned. If it weren't for Wenren Xiang's feelings, Nie Tian would have already killed Wenren Tu. Nie Tian, are you really going to save them? Wenren Tu looked at Nie Tian and asked cautiously. Do I have a choice? Nie Tianling responded coldly. If the person who was captured was Wenren Xiang, would you not save them? Wenren Tu's expression froze. He looked at Wenren Xiang and was speechless. Nie Tian, I'll go with you. At this time, Wenren Xiang suddenly took a step forward and looked at Nie Tian with a burning gaze. Xiang, what are you going to do? Wenren Tu was stunned for a moment. He immediately reacted and reprimanded coldly. It was obvious that he knew the danger of this trip and didn't want Wenren Xiang to take the risk. Father, you did it. I can't stand idly by. Wenren Xiang's pretty face was gloomy. Moreover, Nie Tian helped us win back the Ice and Fire Spirit Springs. We owe him a great favor. I can't watch him take the risk alone. What's more, if it weren't for him, I would have lost my life long ago. At this time, the scene of Nie Tian withstanding Ming Tai's raging flame crystal with his own body in order to save her appeared in her mind. This time, she must go to Wolf Night City with Nie Tian. Wenren too was stunned. He didn't expect the situation to develop to this point. If Wenren Xiang went to Wolf Night City with Nie Tian and something happened to her, then wouldn't he, as her father, be better off dead? Father, I've decided. Wenren Xiang didn't care about Wenren Tu's expression and said calmly, but firmly. Wenren Tu's expression was ugly. After a long silence, he finally asked, Wolf Night City doesn't allow others to enter. How do you plan to go? He asked this as an agreement to let Wenren Xiang and Nie Tian go to Wolf Night City together. Wenren Xiang thought for a moment and said, The Wolf Night struggle is about to begin. We will enter Wolf Night City in the name of participating in the Wolf Night struggle. This thing is for you. It should allow one of you to enter the city. At this time, Wenren Tu suddenly took out a token and handed it to Wenren Xiang. Wolf Night token. Nie Tian and Wenren Xiang exclaimed at the same time when they saw the token. They didn't expect that Wenren Tu could actually take out a Wolf Night token. You've seen the Wolf Night token? Wenren Tu was stunned. He was equally surprised. How did Nie Tian and Wenren Xiang know about the Wolf Night token? Nie Tian frowned and took out a token. It was the Wolf Night token that Wolf C gave him before. Chapter 35:14. The strange Canyon. Nie Tian looked at Wenren Tu and briefly told him about how he obtained the Night Wolf order. After listening to Nie Tian, Wenren Tu immediately exclaimed, Nie Tian, if that's the case, then you can't go to Night Wolf City. Can't you see? That wolf commander is clearly up to no good. He wants you to become a wolf slave. Although Nie Tian did not explain it in detail, Wenren Tu had already heard some clues. That wolf commander was clearly plotting against Nie Tian. I know, Nie Tian responded with a calm expression. At this time, even if there was a mountain of blades and a volcano ahead, he could only go. Could he give up on Duanmu Lu and the others? That Wolf C works for Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf, right? Nie Tian asked calmly, looking at Wenren Tuesday. Yes. Wenren Tu nodded heavily. His face was very ugly. If he had known that things would turn out like this, he would not have betrayed Duanmu Lu and the others. But at this moment it was too late for regrets. How much do you know about the Evil Moon Wolf? What is the status of that wolf commander in the Evil Moon Wolf? How many experts are there in the Evil Moon Wolf? Nie Tian asked with a stern expression. The Evil Moon Wolf is a mysterious organization. I don't know much about it. Wenren Tu frowned deeply and said, however, Wolf Commander's status in the Evil Moon Wolf should not be high. I heard that above Wolf Commander, there are the 9 great Wolf Kings and the mysterious Wolf Emperor. Rumor has it that the strength of the 9 great Wolf Kings are at the Heavenly Mandate 9th level Saint Masters. No one knows the strength of the Wolf Emperor, but it is very likely that he is an expert at the level of Saint Lord Tianyi. Nie Tian frowned and his expression did not look good. Although the Heavenly Mandate 9th level Saint Masters and Saint Lord Tianyi were not experts in the entire sacred world, they were definitely at the peak of strength in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. After all, the 7th sacred world of cultivators was only an elementary sacred world. The level of the world in the sacred world was different, so the limits of martial arts were different as well. Just like in the planar worlds, the 3,000 minor realms, Shumi world, and the heaven realms divine realm, although they were all planar worlds, the limits of a martial artist's strength were completely different. In the 7 cultivators' sacred world, Reaching the cultivation of sage Monarch Tianyi was already the limit of the martial Tao. More importantly, Nye Tian was only at the first tier of heavenly rhythm and had just entered the holy realm. Even if he activated his god-demon body, he would only be comparable to a warrior at the 9th tier of heavenly rhythm or a weaker heavenly mandate Saint Master. Apart from the mysterious Wolf Emperor, there were also 9 Wolf Kings in the demonic moon Heavenly Wolf. It was no exaggeration to say that any Wolf King could kill Nye Tian in an instant. In this way, it would be extremely difficult to rescue Duanmu Lu and the others. After that, Nye Tian asked Wenren Tu a few more questions before preparing to head to Wolf Night City. Wenren Xiang looked at Nye Tian and said hesitantly, "Nye Tian, your injuries are so serious. Let's wait for you to recover first." Nye Tian glanced at Wenren Xiang and said in a deep voice, "Let's go now. I can recover on the way." Wenren Xiang knew that Nye Tian was eager to save them, so she didn't say anything more and nodded. Nye Tian and Wenren Xiang didn't stay any longer. After leaving Wolf Forest City, they headed toward Wolf Night City. Wolf Night City was located in the core of Wolf Night Mountain. It was located in the center of the mountain range, and was very far from Wolf Forest City. Even if Nye Tian and Wenren Xiang ran day and night, it would still take them a few days to get there. After entering Wolf Night Mountain, Nye Tian didn't speed up. Instead, he moved forward at a normal speed. He was injured and needed to use the time on the road to recover. If he entered Wolf Night City with an injured body, he wouldn't have a chance to save Duanmu Lu and the others. Wenren Xiang, Wolf Night City is so vast. There must be some sacred materials in the mountain, right? Nye Tian glanced at Wenren Xiang and asked indifferently. The various medicinal herbs in the world were divided into spirit grade, god grade, saint grade, and so on according to the major grades. They were also referred to as spirit, god, and saint materials. Each major grade was further divided into 9 grades. In the planar world, Nye Tian had paid more attention to spirit materials. At that time, he was still a spirit alchemist. However, after coming to the realm, because he no longer cultivated alchemy, he didn't pay much attention to the various sacred materials. He couldn't help but ask when he saw the lush greenery of Wolf Night Mountain. "Yes." Wenren Xiang nodded and said, "There are many sacred materials in Wolf's Night Mountain. The most famous one is the werewolf flower, which is a genuine 3rd-rank sacred material. Its medicinal power is very strong, and it can greatly improve a warrior." Werewolf flower. Nye Tian nodded slightly and murmured, "This name is quite novel. There are many sacred beasts in Wolf Night Mountain. Many mercenary groups come here specifically to capture sacred beasts." Wenren Xiang thought that Nye Tian was very interested in this and couldn't help but add, "Yes." Nye Tian nodded and didn't say anything else. Following that, as Nye Tian's strength slowly recovered, the duo's speed also increased significantly. 2 days later, the duo arrived outside a canyon. "Nye Tian, according to the map, we will see Wolf Night City after passing through this canyon." Wenren Xiang took out the map with an excited expression. This was also her first time coming to Wolf Night City, so she couldn't help but feel excited. Nye Tian nodded slightly and looked at the canyon in front of him. He couldn't help but furrow his brows. The canyon looked very long and serene. On both sides were mountain cliffs that were tens of thousands of meters tall. It was steep and precipitous. For some reason, Nye Tian faintly had an ominous feeling when he saw the canyon in front of him. "Nye Tian, let's go." Wenren Xiang was very excited at this moment. She laughed and directly stepped into the canyon. Nye Tian frowned and hurriedly followed. The moment they entered the canyon, Nye Tian immediately felt a rush of cold air, which made the ominous feeling in his heart even stronger. He felt that the surrounding space was filled with a strange, evil aura. It seemed a little familiar, but also very strange. It was very strange. "Nye Tian, are you all right?" Wenren Xiang sensed that Nye Tian's expression wasn't right and couldn't help but ask. "I'm fine." Nie Tian forced a smile and calmed himself down. Oh. Wenren Xiang replied and didn't ask any more questions. Following that, the two of them walked for about 10 li. Nie Tian's expression became more and more unsightly. He could feel that the evil aura in the air was getting thicker, to the point that he felt like he couldn't breathe. Nie Tian, what's wrong? Wenren Xiang panicked when she saw Nie Tian's forehead covered in sweat. She took a step forward and supported Nie Tian. Nie Tian looked at Wenren Xiang with an extremely strange expression. Even with his powerful martial body, he was still having trouble breathing, but Wenren Xiang didn't feel anything. What was going on? Chapter 35:15. What's going on? Nie Tian, are you alright? Wenren Xiang asked in a panic when she saw Nie Tian vomiting blood all of a sudden. Nie Tian took a deep breath, and the strange fluctuations inside of him weakened slightly. However, his face was still as pale as a sheet of paper, which made him look very scary. Although he could feel the strange energy weakening, he could feel a tearing pain in his body, as if every muscle and bone in his body was being stretched by some force. I'm fine. Nie Tian endured the excruciating pain as he nodded slightly and asked, Wenren Xiang, don't you feel anything? Feel what? Wenren Xiang was confused. She had no idea what Nie Tian was talking about. How is this possible? Nie Tian frowned, and his expression became very unsightly. He couldn't believe that he was the only one who sensed the evil aura in the air. Nie Tian, what's going on? Are you alright? Wenren Xiang asked with flickering eyes. She was frightened by Nie Tian. I'm fine. Nie Tian forced a smile. He did not want Wenren Xiang to worry. The Ghost Emperor did not say anything either. It was obvious that he did not understand what was happening to Nie Tian. Wenren Xiang, let's leave this valley. Nie Tian looked at the walls around him. He could feel a faint layer of black qi lingering on the mountain. He leaned on Wenren Xiang and said in a deep voice. He did not have any energy left. It was as if some hidden force in his body had been activated, and he could not endure it. Sure, Wenren Xiang said as she held Nie Tian's arm and sped off. However, this valley was extremely long. They had not even covered half of it after half a day. Nie Tian, are you alright? Wenren Xiang saw that Nie Tian's face was even worse. His body was as pale as a piece of paper, and he was covered in cold sweat. His body was burning hot as if he was being roasted. She knew that something must have happened to Nie Tian. I'm fine. Nie Tian was gasping for breath. Not only was his entire body in pain, as if he was surrounded by raging flames, but he also felt like he was suffocating. It was as if there was a giant invisible hand pressing down on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. Wenren Xiang's beautiful face was unsightly, and she couldn't help but be slightly flustered. Let's go, quickly leave this canyon, Nie Tian said in a deep voice as he endured the pain. Wenren Xiang nodded and dashed forward with Nie Tian in tow. Pooh! However, at this moment, Nie Tian's body suddenly collapsed and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Nie Tian. Wenren Xiang quickly held on to Nie Tian, only to see that the blood he spat out was actually black in color. Furthermore, there was an evil aura being emitted from it, along with a foul stench. You've been poisoned? Wenren Xiang was shocked. She helped Nie Tian to the side of a giant rock with a shocked expression. I don't know either. Nie Tian panted heavily and shook his head. He was feeling extremely uncomfortable, as if his body was about to explode. But at this moment, his consciousness was still clear. He didn't think that he had been poisoned. He had the 9 dragon veins, and with the heavenly punishment force tempering his body, as well as the sacred spirit blood seal, ordinary poisons wouldn't be able to harm him. Furthermore, none of the people he had come into contact with during this period of time were experts in using poisons. It was impossible for them to poison him without him knowing. All the suspicious points pointed to this canyon. Before entering the canyon, Nye Tian already had a bad feeling, and after entering the canyon, he felt an evil aura, which made him feel more and more uncomfortable. There must be some kind of force in this canyon that stimulated the other force in Nye Tian's body, causing it to awaken. Let's go. Nye Tian guessed. He forced himself to stand up and prepared to move forward. He had to leave this canyon, or else the situation would only worsen. Wenren Xiang held on to Nye Tian, but the latter was still like a pile of mud. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't support him. Nye Tian felt as if his entire body was being torn apart, and he couldn't muster any strength. I'll carry you. Wenren Xiang frowned. Then, without giving Nye Tian a chance to speak, she directly carried Nye Tian on her back. Nye Tian's face was taut, and his face began to turn black, as if he had been poisoned. At this moment, he could only endure it and think about it after leaving this canyon. Oh, what a loving couple! Just then, a deep voice rang out. Then, a figure in black descended from the sky and blocked Wenren Xiang's way. Who are you? Wenren Xiang was shocked as she stared at the person. Little girl, if you want to know who I am, then come over here and whisper into my ear. I will definitely let you know who I am. The person's eyes were filled with lust as he looked up and down Wenren Xiang's body. He even stuck out his tongue as he spoke in a wretched manner. F***ck off. When Wenren Xiang saw this scene, no matter how stupid she was, she knew who the latter was. She growled in a low voice. Little girl, isn't it a waste for such a beautiful woman like you to follow a cripple? Why don't you follow me? I promise you'll have a taste of the best in the world. The person smiled even more wretchedly as he stared at Wenren Xiang. His eyes were about to fall out of their socket. You're seeking death. Wenren Xiang's eyes quivered as she became furious. She growled and put Nye Tian to the side. She said in a low voice, If you don't F***ck off, don't blame me for being rude. Oh. The person rubbed his chin and nodded. Little girl, come at me. I sure want to see how rude you are going to be. Bastard. Wenren Xiang was completely enraged. She howled and the 9 floating leaves plant attacked. It pierced through the air and formed a green blade in the air that headed towards the person. Little girl, you've got some tricks up your sleeve. The person smiled evilly and moved. Like a ray of black light, he dashed towards Wenren Xiang. Ah! Wenren Xiang's face changed color as she screamed. In the next moment, that person somehow appeared behind her, reached out a hand and directly grabbed her neck. You! In an instant, Wenren Xiang was speechless. Damn it! Nye Tian roared inwardly. He saw everything that was happening, but he was powerless to do anything. He wanted to stand up, but he found that his body was like a pile of mud, and he couldn't summon any strength. What was going on? Nye Tian was sweating profusely. He wanted to clench his fists, but he didn't have the strength to do so. Little girl, you're mine. At this time, the man actually laughed lewdly and prepared to make his move on Wenren Xiang. Third brother, what are you doing? However, right at that moment, a deep voice rang out, and 2 black-robed figures appeared in front of Nye Tian and the others. Chapter 35:16. Wait! Just as the third brother was about to make a move on Wenren Xiang, one of the men in black seemed to have noticed something and hurriedly shouted. Second brother, what's wrong? The third brother looked at the man in black and asked with a frown. This girl seems to be Wenren Tu's daughter. The second brother looked at Wenren Xiang and said in a deep voice, Wenren Tu. The leader was stunned for a moment, then his face darkened and said, Although Wenren Tu's strength isn't that great, he is still the city lord of the Forest Wolf City. If this girl is his daughter, I'm afraid there will be some trouble. Big brother, second brother, it's no trouble at all. This little girl is too pretty. At worst, we can just kill her after we play with her. Anyway, Wenren Tu won't know who killed his daughter. The black-clothed man's third brother didn't give up. He laughed and said, The other two men in black looked at each other and finally nodded and said, "Then hurry up, we'll wait for you in front." "Okay." The third brother laughed and was extremely proud. At this moment, the old man in black noticed Nyetian and said coldly, "Third brother, I'll take care of this brat for you." "Second brother, this brat seems to be poisoned. Don't bother with him." The third brother laughed and said with a gloomy face, "Today, I'm going to play with his woman in front of him. This will be a different kind of fun. You, hurry up. After you're done, clean it up." The second brother frowned and shook his head. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After the two black-clothed men walked far away, the third black-clothed man chuckled. He caressed Wenren Xiang's face with one hand, but his eyes were fixed on Nyetian's body. He said with a sinister smile, "Boy, you better watch carefully how I play with your woman." Rip. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and tore Wenren Xiang's clothes. Her snow-white skin was immediately revealed. It was extremely alluring. "Bastard!" Wenren Xiang cried out in alarm. She wanted to resist, but she discovered that her entire body was enveloped by a strange force, and she was actually unable to exert any strength. This man in black was much stronger than her. He was already a heavenly mandate 5th-tier Saint Master. She could not fight against him at all. Damn it! The scene in front of him caused Nyetian's eyes to tremble. His eyes were filled with a terrifying rage. Every bone in his body, every meridian, every inch of flesh and blood felt like they were about to ignite. However, the angrier he got, the more intense the tearing sensation in his body became. The feeling of his body being torn apart by the raging flames was driving him crazy. "Brat, are you angry?" The black-clothed man chuckled. His eyes were filled with a lustful light as he laughed in a perverted manner. "You deserve to die." At this moment, Nyetian suddenly stood up. His entire body was surging with an extremely terrifying dark aura. His entire body seemed to be shrouded in darkness, like a dark abyss. At this moment, the black-clothed man suddenly felt a terrifying demonic aura rushing toward him. He frowned and could not help but let out a cry of surprise. He did not expect that Nyetian, who was as weak as mud just a moment ago, would suddenly stand up and even release such a terrifying power. "Brat, looks like I'll kill you first." However, in the next moment, the black-clothed man calmed down. He smiled coldly and directly threw Wenren Xiang aside. Then, he took a step toward Nyetian. His entire body's aura exploded, and he blasted out a fist. The terrifying fist shadow was like a mountain, pressing toward Nyetian. Bang! In the next moment, the terrifying fist shadow directly hit Nyetian's body. A terrible muffled sound was heard, and the ground was stirred up tens of meters high. Nyetian! Wenren Xiang saw this scene, and her eyes trembled as she screamed. This black-clothed man was a heavenly mandate 5th-tier Saint Master. The power of his fist was enough to destroy a mountain. How could Nyetian withstand it when he was seriously injured? "You deserve to die." However, at this moment, a low murderous voice sounded. Then, in the rolling soil, a figure directly rushed over like a wild beast. The black-clothed man was stunned. Before he had time to react, Nyetian had already come to his side. Bang! Nyetian directly blasted out a fist, smashing toward the black-clothed man's face. The latter's eyes trembled, and he subconsciously reached out to block, but a muffled sound was heard, and there was a bloody scene in front of him. His arm was actually smashed by Nyetian's fist. "Brat, you!" The black-clothed man was shocked. Just as he was about to open his mouth to say something, Nyetian greeted him with a second punch. Boom! With a muffled sound, the black-clothed man's figure directly flew backward, smashing heavily on a huge rock. Almost at the same time, Nyetian's figure rushed into the sky, like a huge rock, directly fell, and fiercely stepped on the black-clothed man's face. Boom! With an explosive sound, the black-clothed man's entire face instantly became a bloody mess. "You deserve to die. You deserve to die. You deserve to die." In the next moment, Nye Tian roared, and every time he shouted, his foot would fall. Boom, boom, bang. With a muffled sound, the black-clothed man directly turned into a pile of mud. He couldn't be any more dead. When Ren Xiang watched from the side, her pair of beautiful eyes trembling, her small face stiff and lifeless, obviously frightened. She couldn't believe the scene in front of her, that the black-clothed man was actually killed by Nye Tian just like that. One had to know that was an expert in the heavenly mandate 5th tier. What happened to Nye Tian's body? Why did the power of his martial body become so strong in an instant? At this moment, a scream suddenly sounded. "Third brother!" The other two black-clothed men actually returned. They just happened to see the scene of Nye Tian's foot falling, saw the scene of their third brother being trampled into mud. "You also deserve to die." At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly raised his head. A pair of incomparably dark eyes looked at the two black-clothed men, and said coldly. The two black-clothed men were stunned. The moment they saw Nye Tian's eyes, they felt as if they were staring into an abyss. There was a feeling of being trapped in it, unable to extricate themselves. What kind of eyes were those? It was too terrifying, like a demon from the depths of the earth. In the moment when the two were stunned, Nye Tian directly rushed over, like a ferocious beast. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a series of muffled sounds, accompanied by the smell of blood, came out. The two black-clothed men, after not having any chance to fight back, were directly killed by Nye Tian. They died in the same way as the previous black-clothed man, directly beaten into a pile of flesh and blood. Nye Tian. When Ren Xiang looked at Nye Tian from afar, her beautiful eyes trembling, she wanted to open her mouth to speak, but did not know what to say. She had no idea what had happened to Nye Tian. Why did Nye Tian, who could not even stand up, become so terrifying in an instant? Chapter 35:17. Don't get close. When Ren Xiang stared at Nye Tian with trembling eyes, the astonishment in her heart was written all over her face. At this moment, Nye Tian was too terrifying. He was like a fierce beast, bloodthirsty and violent. His whole body was surging with raging demon qi, and his aura seemed to be able to devour everything, as if he wanted to destroy everything. Bang, bang, bang. However, the demon qi around Nye Tian didn't weaken at all. Instead, it grew more and more terrifying. Like raging waves, it crashed into the void, looking extremely terrifying. Nye Tian, are you alright? When Ren Xiang saw Nye Tian standing in the same spot after killing the two black-robed men, her eyes were deep like the abyss, emitting a dark aura, giving her a terrifying appearance. She took a step forward and approached Nye Tian while asking cautiously, "Don't get close to me." Nye Tian raised his head as the demonic aura emitting from his body skyrocketed, as if he was on fire. "You!" At that moment, Ren Xiang's pretty face went blank as soon as she saw Nye Tian's face clearly. She could see strange black runes covering Nye Tian's face, and his eyes were surrounded by a dark demonic aura, as if he was a devil that had just walked out from hell. It was as if a powerful force was trying to control Nye Tian. Ren Xiang's expression stiffened, not daring to get any closer. She subconsciously backed away. She had no idea what was happening to Nye Tian, nor what was going to happen next. At that moment, Nye Tian suddenly threw his head back and screamed. His face was twisted and distorted, as if he was in great pain. At this moment, he could feel a terrifying power slowly awakening in his body. This power was unbearable, and it was driving him crazy. It was the force that had turned him into a demon, causing him to almost lose control. What was even weirder was that this power seemed somewhat familiar to him. However, he couldn't remember where he had sensed it before. When Ren Xiang looked at Nye Tian with a terrified expression, completely panicking, She clearly felt that the power of Nye Tian at this time was much stronger than that of Wenren II in the state of forest wolf curse body. It was hard to imagine how Nye Tian's martial body could withstand such a terrifying power. Roar! At this time, Nye Tian suddenly let out a ferocious roar. Like a wild beast, the violent and turbulent demonic aura around his body faintly condensed into a demonic figure. The surrounding space was filled with a suffocating demonic aura. Bang! 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 Following that, an even more shocking scene occurred. Bloody wounds appeared on Nye Tian's body, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Accompanying the blood was an even stronger demonic aura. A terrifying demonic aura enveloped Nye Tian's body as if it wanted to devour him. Nye Tian. Seeing this, Wenren Xiang screamed in fear and immediately rushed over. Kaboom! However, at this time, the demonic aura suddenly surged, and a violent and murderous aura burst out. Wenren Xiang immediately felt a terrifying suppressive force rushing at her, and she was directly sent flying. Wenren Xiang barely managed to stand, but her injuries were extremely serious. Her face was deathly pale, and there were several wounds on her body that were so deep that her bones could be seen. It was as if she had been torn by sharp claws, and blood was flowing everywhere. She ignored her own wounds and raised her head to look at Nye Tian, who was completely enveloped by the demonic aura and could not be seen. "Don't come any closer." At this time, Nye Tian's voice suddenly rang out, as if he had not been devoured, and his consciousness was still clear. Wenren Xiang's beautiful eyes trembled, and she retreated, not daring to rashly approach. At this time, she had no idea what was happening to Nye Tian's body. Amidst the layers of demonic aura, Nye Tian sat cross-legged. His body was tightly bound by the 9 heavenly shackles. He did not know what would happen next, so he used the heavenly shackles to bind himself first. He could feel the demonic aura in his body rumbling continuously, as if it was going to devour everything. He could vaguely feel that the force seemed to have originated from the heart of the sky, but it was not under the control of the sky's heart. The heart of the sky seemed to have been triggered by some kind of force, or perhaps it had sensed some kind of force, which was why it had unleashed such a ferocious force. Meanwhile, not only was Nye Tian's martial body suffering a great impact, but his divine sense was also greatly affected. If it were not for the eternal night demon fox, his divine sense would have already collapsed. Currently, he was suppressing himself with the heavenly shackles, and waiting for the demonic aura to slowly weaken. Following this, the demonic aura on Nye Tian's body became even more ferocious, and the soaring aura was extremely terrifying. Half a day later, the demonic aura surrounding his body had increased to its limit, while the impact on his martial body and divine sense had also reached its limit. The entire canyon was filled with Nye Tian's heart-wrenching cries of agony. Wenren Xiang could only watch from the side, unable to provide any help to Nye Tian. Following this, half a day later, the demonic aura on Nye Tian's body finally began to weaken. During this period, the pain that Nye Tian had endured was unimaginable to ordinary people. He could feel his body on the verge of collapsing countless times. If it were not for the heavenly shackles and the star origin stones, he would have exploded and died. Following this, 3 days later, the demonic aura surrounding Nye Tian's body slowly dissipated. Nye Tian. Wenren Xiang yelled in surprise when she saw the demonic aura around Nye Tian's body disappearing. "I'm fine now." Nye Tian stood up. His aura was sharp and sharp. You've broken through." Wenren Xiang stared at Nye Tian's clear eyes and was stunned for a moment. She finally reacted after a while and exclaimed. She discovered that Nye Tian's aura was much stronger than before, and his aura was sharper, as if he had been reborn. Nye Tian nodded with a faint smile. After 4 days of life and death struggle, not only did he survive, but his strength had also broken through to the 2nd level of heavenly rhythm. More importantly, all his injuries were completely healed. Even the demonic eye and heavenly punishment godly reversal were completely healed. At this moment, he really felt like he had been reborn. But at this time, he was more concerned about something else, the source of the demonic aura. During these 4 days, he repeatedly sensed the demonic aura, and finally confirmed that the demonic aura came from the heaven-punishing demon heart. That's right, he was very sure that the demonic aura came from the heaven-punishing demon heart. He had met the Emperor of the Netherworld several times, so he was not unfamiliar with the aura of the heaven-punishing demon heart. But the demonic aura he released earlier was even more intense, and when he was enduring the demonic aura, the heaven-punishing demon heart and the Emperor of the Netherworld appeared in his mind. That face was a bit unfamiliar, but he was very sure that it was the Emperor of the Netherworld. Why would the Emperor of the Netherworld appear here? Chapter 35:18. Chapter 35:13. Demon Chi Formation, the heaven-punishing demon heart? How is that possible? Nie Tian frowned. Although the demon Chi in the canyon was hidden very deeply, and its aura was different from the heaven-punishing demon Chi that he had sensed before, the deeper demonic aura would not change. The canyon was indeed filled with heaven-punishing demon Chi. However, this was too strange, and Nie Tian could not figure it out. Could the Emperor of the Netherworld have been here before? Nie Tian guessed, but he felt that it was impossible. Even if the Emperor of the Netherworld had been here before, he should not have left behind such a terrifying heaven-punishing demon Chi. Even if the Emperor of the Netherworld had become a sage in a realm, his strength should not have been so strong. If the Emperor of the Netherworld was really strong enough to release such a terrifying demon Chi, then Evil Moon Wolf's men would not have been able to catch him. However, if the demon Chi in the canyon was not left behind by the Emperor of the Netherworld, who could it be? The previous owner of the heaven-punishing devil heart? Nie Tian suddenly thought of something. His brow furrowed and his expression flickered. Items like the Star Origin Stone and the heaven-punishing demon heart had more than one owner. The Emperor of the Netherworld might not have been the original owner of the heaven-punishing demon heart. Before him, the heaven-punishing demon heart might have had other owners. In that case, the demon Chi in the canyon could have been left behind by the previous owner of the heaven-punishing demon heart. However, if that was the case, why did the Emperor of the Netherworld's figure appear in Nie Tian's mind when the demon Chi was oppressing him? Everything was like a deep mystery, and Nie Tian was completely confused. What confused him even more was why he could sense the heaven-punishing demon Chi and even activate the power of the Heart of the Sky. Could the heaven-punishing demon heart and the Heart of the Sky be related in some way? Nie Tian frowned as his expression changed. However, he could not come up with anything after thinking for a long time, so he gave up. Let's go. After a while, Nie Tian became cold and prepared to leave immediately. Nie Tian, look. At this time, Wenren Xiang walked over with a strange flower in her hand and handed it to Nie Tian. What's this? Nie Tian was taken aback, and his attention was immediately drawn to the flower. The flower wasn't very big. It was roughly the size of an adult's fist. However, its appearance was very strange. Its black petals gave off a baleful aura. The entire flower looked like a wolf's head. What do you think? Wenren Xiang laughed, looking very happy. Werewolf flower. Nie Tian suddenly thought of something and exclaimed. Previously, Wenren Xiang had told him that Wolf's Night Mountain produced a type of third-grade holy material called the werewolf flower. Looking at the appearance of this flower, it was undoubtedly a werewolf flower. Yes. Wenren Xiang nodded heavily. She took out a spatial ring and said proudly, "There are dozens of them in the ring. Where did you find it?" Nie Tian was taken aback, his face filled with confusion. From the bodies of those 3 fellows. Wenren Xiang laughed and pointed at the flesh that had already begun to rot not far away. Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he immediately understood. Turned out that Wenren Xiang had found the werewolf flower from the 3 men in black. Nie Tian, Do you know who they are? At this time, Wenren Xiang looked at Nie Tian and asked with a strange expression. You know? Nie Tian was slightly stunned and asked. They are from the Seven Wolves mercenary group. Wenren Xiang nodded, looking a little flustered. Seven Wolves mercenary group. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard this name. When he first arrived at Wolf's Night Mountain, he also encountered 3 men in black who had lusted after Ningxiu and died at Nie Tian's hands. One of the men in black had threatened Nie Tian and said that they were from the Seven Wolves mercenary group. Is this Seven Wolves mercenary group very strong? Nie Tian frowned and asked. Yes. Wenren Xiang nodded and said, the Seven Wolves mercenary group is one of the 2 largest mercenary groups in Wolf's Night Mountain. I heard that even the Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf group doesn't dare to provoke them. Most of those mercenaries are cruel and ruthless people. They are active in Wolf's Night Mountain all year round, killing all kinds of sacred beasts. Nie Tian looked at Wenren Xiang and couldn't help but laugh. Will there be trouble if we kill people from the Seven Wolves mercenary group? I don't think so. Wenren Xiang was a little uncertain and said, they deserved their deaths. As long as we don't say anything, no one will know how they died. Yes. Nie Tian nodded and faintly smiled. He didn't stay any longer and immediately left. After 4 days of life and death struggle, Nie Tian felt that the demon energy in the surrounding space was still there, but it was no longer oppressing him. His martial body seemed to have adapted to the demon energy. Half a day later, Nie Tian and Wenren Xiang arrived at the other end of the canyon. They were about to leave. Wait. But at this time, Nie Tian suddenly stopped and looked at a mountain wall high up in the sky. Nie Tian, did you find something? Wenren Xiang looked at Nie Tian with a puzzled expression. She didn't know what had happened to him. Wait for me. Nie Tian nodded slightly and took a step forward. His figure shot up into the sky. His face was gloomy and his eyes were a little strange. He sensed a strange aura in the air, which the heart of the sky in his body had sensed. However, the strange thing was that the surroundings were empty, as if there was nothing at all. What's going on? Nie Tian was puzzled. He took a deep breath and calmed down, then began to carefully sense the space around him. A while later, his eyes flickered as he stared at a spot on the mountain wall and murmured, "It's here." After saying this, a sword intent surged out from his palm and shrouded the area. Bang! The moment the sword intent fell, the originally empty place seemed to have been hit, and the mountain wall next to it shook a little. Following this, a black vortex gradually became clearer in the sky. The black vortex floated in the air like a dark abyss, emitting a strong demon aura that spread across the sky. The demon aura is coming from this vortex. Nie Tian stared at the demon vortex with trembling eyes. He could sense an unusually strong heaven-punishing demon aura, as if the center of the vortex contained an endless amount of demon aura. I know. At that moment, the ghost monarch's voice could be heard. He let out an excited cry and said, "This is a demonic formation, and this vortex is the eye of the formation." A demon formation? Nie Tian was startled when he heard the ghost monarch's voice. Chapter 35:19. Nie Tian exclaimed as he sensed the demonic aura. However, before he could react, his entire body was shrouded by the demonic aura. At that instant, he once again felt a suffocating pressure, causing his expression to darken. Could it be that the torture from before was going to happen again? Nie Tian. Wenren Xiang screamed in shock when she saw the scene in the sky. However, she did not approach Nie Tian this time. Nie Tian hovered in midair. His entire body was shrouded by the demonic aura, making it impossible to see his figure. At that instant, he could feel that the heart of the sky in his body had gone berserk, unleashing waves of energy to attack his martial body. However, the feeling did not last for long. A moment later, the demonic aura in the air was completely absorbed by Nie Tian's body, as if he had merged with the heart of the sky. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Nie Tian frowned, a confused look on his face. He tried to sense his martial body, but did not find anything strange. It was as if the demonic aura had merged with his body and disappeared. Moreover, he could not even sense the heart of Haotian now. After the heart of the sky had merged with him, he rarely felt the presence of the heart of the sky. Only when the heart of the sky had awakened did he feel the presence of the heart of the sky. This time, the heart of the sky had appeared once again under the stimulation of the demonic aura. However, the heart of the sky had disappeared after merging with the demonic aura, leaving him confused. If the heart of the sky had awakened, why could he not feel it? Nie Tian, are you alright? Wenren Xiang came to Nie Tian's side and asked worriedly. I'm fine. Nie Tian smiled faintly and stopped thinking about it. He knew too little about the heart of the sky. Once the matter with the Emperor of the Underworld was settled, he planned to immediately go find Zhong Mingyu and ask more about the heart of the sky. Then, Nie Tian didn't stay in the canyon and headed directly to Wolf Night City. Half an hour later, a majestic ancient city appeared in front of them. The ancient city in front of him was very vast. It was several times larger than the myriad treasures mall that Nie Tian had seen before. From a distance, it looked like a giant beast lying on the ground. Nie Tian, this is Wolf Night City. Wenren Xiang looked at the city in front of her, unable to conceal the excitement in her heart. This was the first time she had come to Wolf Night City. To the people of Wolf Night Mountain, Wolf Night City was like a legend. Let's enter the city. Nie Tian nodded, his eyes shining with a sharp light. He came here to save people. After the two entered the city, they walked on the wide streets of Wolf Night City. There weren't many people around, and there were many young warriors who should be here to participate in the Wolf Night contest. Wenren Xiang, how much do you know about the Wolf Night contest? At this time, Nie Tian looked at Wenren Xiang and asked. The Wolf Night contest is a martial arts competition for warriors under the age of 10,000. I heard that those who can enter the top 10 can directly join the evil Moonwolf and be nurtured by the evil Moonwolf. Wenren Xiang nodded slightly, obviously not knowing much about the Wolf Night contest. Nie Tian nodded and didn't ask much. Next, the two came to a restaurant in the city and found a remote place to sit. Nie Tian wanted to inquire about the Wolf Night contest from this place, and at the same time, he wanted to find out about the wolf slave. However, at this time, most of the people were talking about the Wolf Night contest. There were still a few days before the start of the Wolf Night contest, but the geniuses of the entire Wolf Night Mountain had already gathered in Wolf Night City. I heard that the Wolf Emperor will personally appear for the Wolf Night contest this time, and he will personally choose 9 Green Wolf Lords. I wonder who will have the honor of being chosen by the Wolf Emperor. Someone sighed, his eyes burning with anticipation. 9 Green Wolf Lords? In the past, didn't only the champion of the Wolf Night contest obtain the title of Green Wolf Lord? Why are there 9 Green Wolf Lords this time? The crowd discussed excitedly. That's right. I heard that the Green Wolf Lords will become the Wolf King in the future, and they might even become the next Wolf Emperor. Could it be that the Wolf Emperor personally appeared this time to choose a successor? Who knows? In the past, the Wolf Emperor never showed himself, but he actually showed up this time. This should make the Wolf Night contest even more intense. Wolf's Night is a battle for hegemony. Only the most talented martial artists can become the Green Wolf Lord. And these people are destined to be the ones to control Wolf's Night Mountain in the future. Who do you think is most likely to become the Green Wolf Lord this time? I heard that 5 of the Wolf Night 9 wolves are participating. I'm afraid that the 5 of them have already locked onto the title of the 9 Green Wolf Masters. It's just that I don't know who will ultimately become the head of the Wolf Night 9 wolves. I heard that Su Kwanga from the Su clan is known as the God of Spears. I think he has a high chance of becoming the champion. Not necessarily. I heard that Qin Tsangqiong from the Qin clan has awakened the immemorial sacred body, and Yin Liujie from the Seven Wolves mercenary group has mastered the legendary Seven Wolves fatal strike. They are all very terrifying figures. There's also Tai Wushang from the Tai clan. His sword principle has reached the Oracle realm, and his profound iron-cold sword is extremely domineering. Few people in the younger generation can compete with him. The crowd discussed endlessly, and each of them had their own candidate. The scene was very lively. There were indeed many geniuses in the Wolf Knight Mountain this time, and there were countless amazing geniuses. When Ye Tian heard the crowd's discussion, he faintly smiled. It seemed that if he were to participate in the Wolf Knight competition, his opponent would be very strong. Not to mention others, just those warriors who were also 9 wolves like Su Kuanga were enough to pose a threat to Nye Tian. Nye Tian, I think that the champion of the Wolf Knight competition will definitely be you. At this time, Wenren Xiang suddenly looked at Nye Tian and said with a serious expression. Her voice was very soft, but it was still heard by a warrior not far away. Ah, there are really all kinds of birds in a big forest. A mere second-level Heaven Rhythm warrior is actually dreaming of becoming the champion of the Wolf Knight competition. What a joke! The warrior laughed out loud, not concealing his contempt for Nye Tian. His voice was very loud, and it immediately attracted everyone's attention. This silver-haired brat wants to become the champion of the Wolf Knight competition? Everyone turned around and looked at Nye Tian, laughing out loud. Nye Tian frowned. Even though he didn't care about these people's comments, his expression was somewhat ugly at the moment. Wenren Xiang's face was filled with embarrassment. She regretted saying such words here. Let's go. Nye Tian faintly smiled, stood up and prepared to leave. Chapter 35:20. 6 Tribulations. Huh! When Nye Tian heard the man's words, his face suddenly sank, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He didn't mean to make things difficult for anyone. Wenren Xiang's words were indeed a bit reckless, but this was only a conversation between her and Nye Tian. It had nothing to do with others. If you don't like it, you can laugh at it, Nye Tian doesn't care. But that black-robed martial artist was very arrogant. He asked Nye Tian to roll over and kowtow to him, which made Nye Tian unable to accept. Nye Tian. Nye Tian took a step forward and wanted to walk over, but he was stopped by Wenren Xiang, who shook her head, making Nye Tian become cold. Nye Tian frowned. His eyes swept across the people in the restaurant, and finally suppressed the anger in his heart. He didn't say anything and directly turned to leave. After all, he had just arrived at the Wolf Knight City. It was not good to have a conflict with others. Ha ha ha. I thought you had some backbone, but it turns out you're just a coward. You want to be the leader of the Wolf Knight City with your cowardly appearance, really funny. When the crowd saw that Nye Tian was about to leave, they all laughed, treating him as a coward. Brat, didn't you hear what 6th Master said just now? However, at this time, that black-robed martial artist didn't intend to let Nye Tian leave. He sneered, suddenly turned around, and a pair of eyes like a vicious wolf firmly stared at Nye Tian. I didn't hear anyone speak, only a mad dog barking in front of me. Nye Tian looked at that black-robed martial artist and replied with a cold smile. This black-robed martial artist looked very young, but his strength had already reached the 9th layer of Heavenly Charm Realm, and the aura around him was very strong. Even compared to Su Kuanga, it was not weaker. At such a young age, with such strength, this person was very likely to be the same as Su Kuanga, also one of the 9 wolves. Brat, what did you say? When that person heard Nye Tian's words, his eyes suddenly turned cold. His entire body surged with a strange and evil aura, incomparably gloomy. What a terrifying aura! Everyone felt the fluctuation of the aura in the void, and their expressions changed. They were shocked. In the next moment, someone recognized the black-robed cultivator. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed, He's the 6th Tribulation. in 6 tribulation. Everyone's expression suddenly changed. The way they looked at the black-robed martial artist instantly changed, and they were extremely fearful. Who would have thought that this unassuming black-robed martial artist turned out to be the #1 genius of the 7 Wolves mercenary group, In Liujie? Just like Su Kuanga, he was also one of the Wolf Knight 9 Wolves. It turned out that the genius everyone was talking about was right in front of them. Looks like the 6th master's name is quite famous. In Liujie swept his gaze across the crowd with a smug look on his face. Clearly, he enjoyed the surprise of the crowd very much. Then, he locked his gaze on Nye Tian again and said in a cold tone, "Brat, hurry up and kowtow and admit your mistake before the 6th master gets angry." "What if I don't?" The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. With a calm face, he asked with a faint smile. "6th master, I don't want to kill anyone today. Don't force me." In Liujie stretched out a hand and clenched it in the air like a wolf's claw. He said in a cold tone, "What he cultivated was the 7 Wolves' ultimate kill. In the entire 7 Wolves mercenary group, apart from the leader, he was the only one who cultivated it. Therefore, he was known as the #1 genius of the 7 Wolves mercenary group and was also considered to be the next leader of the 7 Wolves mercenary group." Nye Tian had heard the conversation of the crowd just now, so he was very clear about In Liujie's identity. But at this moment, he was not afraid at all. "Brat, come and kowtow." In Liujie smiled coldly, raised his chin and said. The crowd looked at Nye Tian with blazing eyes, obviously ready to watch a good show. "Idiot!" Nye Tian sneered and turned around, completely ignoring In Liujie. "You're courting death." In Liujie's eyes darkened. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he roared. Then, like a vicious wolf, he struck out with his palm towards Nye Tian. In this restaurant there was a large formation protecting it. In Liujie did not dare to release too much power, otherwise, it would trigger the killing intent of the large formation. "Nye Tian, be careful." Seeing this, Wenren Xiang was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale and she screamed. As one of the 9 wolves, In Liujie's strength could be imagined. If he was hit by his palm, Nye Tian would definitely be seriously injured. Bang! However, at this moment, Nye Tian directly turned around and did not dodge at all. He also struck out with his palm. Suddenly, the 2 palms collided, making a muffled sound like metal and stone, causing a fluctuation in the void. Immediately, In Liujie's figure took a few steps back and almost fell to the ground, looking very embarrassed. On the other hand, Nye Tian was like an old tree rooted to the ground, not moving at all. How is this possible? The scene in front of them made the crowd unable to believe it and exclaimed in unison. Who would have thought that In Liujie's sudden attack was not only blocked by Nye Tian, but also pushed back several meters? It was really incredible. One must know that In Liujie was a 9th-level Heavenly Aura martial artist, while Nye Tian was only at the 2nd level of Heavenly Aura. Moreover, In Liujie's 7 Wolves' ultimate kill had greatly improved his martial body. It was simply too illusory for him to be defeated by Nye Tian at such a close distance. In fact, if Nye Tian attacked with all his strength just now, he could at least seriously injure In Liujie, if not kill him. On the one hand, he was afraid of the large formation in the space, and on the other hand, he didn't want to get into trouble. After all, In Liujie was one of the 9 wolves and had a special status in the 7 Wolves mercenary group. If he was injured, he would probably be hunted down by the 7 Wolves mercenary group. "Kid, how come you're so strong?" In Liujie asked in surprise as he stabilized his body and looked at Nye Tian in shock. "It's not that I'm too strong, it's that you're too weak." Nye Tianling sneered and then turned around again, ready to leave. He didn't want to waste time on In Liujie. It was better to leave as soon as possible. "You want to leave just like that? Dream on." In Liujie's eyes were gloomy and murderous at this time. He spoke in a cold tone, and the aura of his whole body began to surge. Liujie can't be thinking of fighting here, right? The crowd trembled when they saw this scene and couldn't help but become nervous. If Liujie attacked with all his strength, he would definitely trigger the large formation, and then everyone present would suffer. Huh! Nie Tian felt Liujie's aura and couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and his face became gloomy. There was no grudge between him and Liujie. At most, it was just a quarrel. But Liujie's posture clearly showed that he wanted to kill him. In the next moment, if Liujie attacked with all his strength, then Nie Tian could only fight with all his strength. Liujie, are you crazy? How dare you fight here? At this moment, a vigorous voice sounded, and then a figure in white descended from the sky and appeared in front of everyone. When Nie Tian heard this voice, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He then looked at the figure in white. It was Su Kuanga. Su Kuanga! Liujie's eyes darkened. He stared at Su Kuanga and called out the latter's name in a cold manner. Su Kuanga! He's Su Kuanga! Everyone was stunned when they heard this name. They immediately turned around and looked at Su Kuanga. Chapter 35:21. Chapter 35:16. Chapter 35:16. Wolf King Su Ching Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and faintly smiled. Although he remained calm, his eyes were blazing with excitement. Nie Tian's appearance made him inexplicably excited. Perhaps it was because he lost to Nie Tian last time, so he was very unwilling and wanted to win back. Su Kuanga actually knows this kid? The crowd looked at Su Kuanga with a horrified expression. They didn't expect Nie Tian and Su Kuanga to know each other. Moreover, from Su Kuanga's reaction, he seemed to be very familiar with Nie Tian. Su Kuanga was one of the 9 wolves, a peak genius of Wolf's Night Mountain. How could he know a second-layer heaven rhythm martial artist? Brother Su. Nie Tian looked at Su Kuanga and faintly smiled in response. He also didn't expect Su Kuanga to appear at this time. Su Kuanga, you know this kid? At this time, Liujie stared at Su Kuanga with a pair of cold eyes and coldly asked, Brother give me some face and let this matter end here. Su Kuanga didn't answer Liujie but said with a faint smile. Liujie's face was gloomy as he said, I'm sorry, your face isn't big enough. So you want to fight here? Su Kuanga couldn't help but frown and asked cold. Su Kuanga, this is a matter between me and him, you better not interfere. Liujie replied cold, his eyes were filled with killing intent. He couldn't wait to eat Nie Tian alive. What if I must interfere? The corner of Su Kuanga's mouth twitched as he pondered. Liujie's face sank and his eyes became even more gloomy. Su Kuanga's words were almost directly provoking him. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but become blazing with excitement. Su Kuanga and Liujie were both recognized as super geniuses of the 9 wolves. Even among the geniuses discussed by the crowd just now, the 2 of them were also strong competitors for the Night Wolf's leader. If these 2 were to fight, there would be a good show to watch. Su Kuanga, for this kid, you want to fall out with me? Liujie was silent for a long time. Then, he calmed down a lot and said solemnly, You and I have never been friends, let alone falling out with each other. If you must fight, I, Su, will accompany you to the end. Su Kuanga laughed and lightly said, You're going too far. After hearing Su Kuanga's words, Liujie's eyes couldn't help but tremble. He let out a low roar and his aura surged crazily, hitting the void. Suddenly, the space shook and a hidden force began to move. Damn it! Nie Tian's face darkened as he sensed the power of the spell formation in the air. Damn it! If Liujie really attacked with all his strength and activated the power of the formation, everyone present would probably suffer. Is Liujie crazy? Everyone also felt the bursts of fluctuations in the void and couldn't help but retreat, looking at Liujie in horror. Liujie, don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you're from the 7 Wolves mercenary group. Su Kuanga wasn't afraid at this time. Instead, He let out a low roar and a fierce spear aura surged from his body, hitting the void. Both of them were geniuses and were equally crazy. "I'll kill you!" Enlyojia's eyes darkened and in a very violent manner, he directly struck out with his palm. Suddenly, a terrifying wolf claw appeared in the void and crazily pressed towards Su Kuanga. "Humph!" Su Kuanga didn't give in and sneered. A spear aura burst out and confronted Enlyojia head-on. Although these two guys looked very arrogant on the surface, they each had a sense of propriety and didn't use their full strength. Bang! In the next moment, two terrifying forces collided head-on. Suddenly, a muffled sound came out in the air and a violent force surged out. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the space suddenly shook, and then a violent and murderous force of the formation was released, whistling and surging, as if it wanted to annihilate everything. The crowd's expression changed dramatically and they all retreated, wanting to escape. But unfortunately, the power of the formation had sealed the space. Under the huge pressure, it was impossible for them to escape. "Stop!" At this moment, a low voice sounded at this moment. Boom! Immediately, a huge force fell and actually dissolved the power of the formation like a spring breeze and rain. Everyone felt the pressure from the space disappear, and their expressions suddenly changed. They then looked towards the direction of the voice and saw a majestic middle-aged man standing there, coldly staring at them. "This person's strength is so strong." Nyetian frowned and looked at the middle-aged man in shock. The power that the middle-aged man used just now was clearly the power of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. To be able to control the power of the Heavenly Mandate Realm so freely, it showed that this person's strength was definitely close to the peak of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The next moment, Nyetian's divine sense swept over and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. The middle-aged man's strength was indeed at the 9th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The 9th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm was definitely a peak expert in the entire sacred world of 7th cultivators. With such strength, this middle-aged man's status in the Wolf's Night Mountain was definitely not low. "Enlyojia, Su Kuanga, how dare you fight here?" At this time, the man spoke in a cold tone with a pair of incomparably gloomy eyes. Suddenly, the scene was dead silent and the atmosphere was oppressive. Su Kuanga and Enlyojia both didn't speak. Only this time, no next time. After a moment, the middle-aged man spoke in a cold tone with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. If two ordinary warriors were to cause trouble here, he would definitely kill them without hesitation. However, Su Kuanga and Enlyojia were, after all, 9 wolves, so he couldn't kill them so casually. At this time, the middle-aged man's eyes were a bit strange as he stared at Su Kuanga for a long time. Su Kuanga didn't speak, and even deliberately avoided the middle-aged man. "You can leave now." The middle-aged man frowned and said in a deep voice, "Thank you, sir." Enlyojia bowed slightly and then glanced at Nyetian and Su Kuanga. He said in a cold tone, "Let's wait and see." Nyetian faintly smiled and didn't respond. After Enlyojia left, Nyetian didn't stay and directly left the restaurant. Su Kuanga also followed him out. "Brother Su, who was the one who attacked just now?" Nyetian looked at Su Kuanga and couldn't help but ask. "He is one of the 9 wolf kings of the evil moon heavenly wolf, Su Qing." Su Kuanga nodded and said in a deep voice, "Wolf King." Nyetian's eyes narrowed and he was surprised. No wonder that person was so powerful, so he was the Wolf King. Nyetian saw Su Kuanga's expression and couldn't help but frown. Could it be that the latter had some relationship with Su Qing? "Brother Nye, this is your first time coming to Wolf Night City. How about I take you around?" At this time, Su Kuanga recovered and said with some excitement, "All right." Nyetian nodded. He still hadn't thought of how to save Duanmu Lu and the others. It was better to follow Su Kuanga and inquire about some information. Then, under Su Kuanga's lead, Nyetian and Wenren Xiang began to stroll around Wolf Night City. Chapter 35:22. Chapter 35:17. Killing a heavenly wolf guard. Brother Nya, are you alright? Su Kwanga saw that Nye Tian's expression was a little abnormal, and couldn't help but frown and ask. Ning Ziyu. Nye Tian's expression was tense. His eyes suddenly trembled and he exclaimed in his heart. He simply couldn't believe that the familiar aura that he sensed at this moment was actually Ning Ziyu's. Over there. In the next moment, Nye Tian's expression changed. His figure immediately moved and madly ran towards the other side of the street. Brother Nye. Su Kwanga was stunned. He didn't know what was going on. After shouting, he immediately chased after him. Wenren Xiang reacted and also chased after him. Nye Tian was in the air, like a ray of light, madly running towards a narrow alley. Damned girl, let's see where you can run now. Before he arrived, he heard a loud shout from afar. At the same time, in a small alley, several black-clothed people came to the entrance of the alley and directly activated a large formation, sealing the entire alley. And at the end of the alley, a petite figure was subconsciously retreating, but behind her, there was no way out. Her body was dripping with blood, her face was covered in blood, but from the general outline, it could still be seen that this was a peerlessly beautiful face. She was none other than Ning Ziyu. Little girl, you're really something, to actually be able to escape here. At this time, a black-clothed person walked over, a pair of eyes as gloomy as killing intent, approaching step by step. What are you guys doing? Ning Ziyu's small face was extremely shocked, her eyes trembled. It was obvious that she was extremely frightened. What do you think? The black-clothed person took a step forward, like a vicious wolf, directly pouncing over. No. Ning Ziyu was frightened and shouted loudly, her hands covering her head. Die. At this moment, a low voice suddenly rang out in the air. After that, a powerful force descended, causing the entire space to sink. Bang! In the next moment, that black-clothed person didn't even have the time to react. He was directly crushed into meat paste by the violent force. Following that, a gap appeared on the grand formation, and a figure fell from it. Like a sharp sword, that figure was stabbed into the ground. Nye Tian. Ning Ziyu suddenly felt a familiar aura. She opened her eyes and saw a familiar figure in front of her. Her face stiffened and she let out a cry in a daze. Tears fell from her eyes uncontrollably. It's fine now. Nye Tian turned around and glanced at Ning Ziyu. His eyes flashed coldly as he spoke in a low voice. Then, his gaze swept across the black-robed men with killing intent. Stinky brat, you really are daring, actually killing a sky wolf guard. The black-robed men had been startled by Nye Tian's sudden appearance. Furthermore, Nye Tian's viciousness had caused their hearts to tremble with fear. Now that they had recovered, they weren't afraid at all. The ones who will kill you. Nye Tian's eyes darkened. A cold light flashed across his eyes and he immediately moved. Several sword intents whizzed out at the same time. They were extremely sharp, as if they could even tear the sky and earth apart. The black-robed men didn't even have time to react and died on the spot. Not even their bones were left. These people were all Heaven Rhyme Stage 5 martial artists, but in front of Nye Tian, they couldn't fight back at all. Nye Tian. At this time, Ning Ziyu looked at Nye Tian and suddenly burst into tears. She threw herself into his arms. Nye Tian frowned and comforted Ning Ziyu to calm her down. Nye Tian. At this time, Su Kwanga and Wenren Xiang arrived and looked at Nye Tian and Ning Ziyu in surprise. You! Ning Ziyu was startled when she saw Wenren Xiang. She pointed at the latter in fear. I'm sorry. Wenren Xiang, of course, knew why Ning Ziyu was so scared. She lowered her head and apologized. It's okay, she won't hurt you. Nye Tian nodded slightly, indicating for Ning Ziyu to calm down. Nye Tian, did you just kill someone? At this time, Su Kwanga looked at Nye Tian and asked in shock. He smelled the blood in the air. Yes. Nye Tian nodded. Don't tell me you killed the Sky Wolf Guards? Su Kwanga frowned and asked in shock. Yes. Nye Tian nodded again. Before those black-robed men died, they indeed called themselves Sky Wolf Guards. Oh no! Su Kwanga's face darkened and his eyes flashed. He was actually very panicked. Nye Tian frowned and asked, Is there a problem? Let's not talk about this for now. Let's leave this place first. Su Kwanga said anxiously. Then, they immediately left. They found a nearby restaurant and asked for a few rooms. Nye Tian told Wenren Xiang to take care of Ningxiu. He wanted to wait for Ningxiu to completely calm down before asking her what happened. Nye Tian and Su Kwanga were in another room. Both of their expressions were not very good. Brother Su, who are those Sky Wolf Guards? Nye Tian looked at Su Kwanga and asked in a deep voice. They are evil Moon Wolf's people. Su Kwanga said in a deep voice. No one has ever dared to kill a Sky Wolf Guard in Wolf Night City. If this matter is leaked out, it will be troublesome. They really are evil Moon Wolf's people. Nye Tian frowned and his expression became gloomy. He had already guessed that those black-robed men were evil Moon Wolf's people. Although Su Kwanga was very nervous at this time, in his eyes, killing a few Sky Wolf Guards was not a big deal. Moreover, he had handled it very cleanly. No one would know. I hope no one saw it. Su Kwanga nodded and then looked at Nye Tian and asked, Brother Nye, who is that girl? A friend of mine. Nye Tian thought for a moment and slightly nodded. Then, he simply told Su Kwanga about Ningxiu and the others. So that's how it is. After Su Kwanga heard Nye Tian's story, he frowned and said with a face full of indignation, You won the Ice and Fire Springs for Forest Wolf City. I didn't expect the Forest Wolf City Lord to give your friend to evil Moon Wolf's people. He really repaid kindness with enmity. Nye Tian's face was gloomy and he did not say anything. After a moment, Wenren Xiang and Ningxiu came to the room. Ningxiu had calmed down a lot. Her injuries had healed a lot, but there was an obvious mark on her face. It was actually an extremely glaring word, slave. The word slave carved on her face represented that she was the lowest and lowest existence. Damn it! Nye Tian looked at the word on Ningxiu's face. His eyes trembled violently and his fists were clenched. Evil Moon Wolf's people had actually turned Ningxiu and the others into wolf slaves. The word slave was obviously carved by a special power. There was a rune aura on it. It was not easy to get rid of it. Nye Tian, I'm fine. Ningxiu was very calm at this time. She was just a little anxious and said, Quickly go and save Duanmu and the others. Where are they? Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he asked in surprise. In the wolf slave market. Ningxiu nodded and said. Chapter 35-23. Wolf Slave Farm. What kind of place is that? Nye Tian's eyes trembled as he looked at Ningxiu and Su Kwanga. I don't know. I was brought there by them. Ningxiu shook her head awkwardly. I just heard from the people there that it's a wolf slave farm. Do you still remember where the wolf slave farm is? Nye Tian frowned and asked nervously. Yeah. Ningxiu nodded and looked at Nye Tian. Let's go save Duanmu. I'm afraid they'll die if we're late. Calm down. Nye Tian took a deep breath and motioned for Ningxiu to calm down. Right now, he wanted to save people more than Ningxiu. But first, he had to figure out what was going on. Then, Ningxiu briefly explained what happened after Nye Tian left. After Nye Tian left, Wenren two-handed Ningxiu and the others over to Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf's people. Then, they were brought to the wolf slave farm in Wolf Night City. Ningxiu was locked up in a wolf cage for a few days. When the guards weren't paying attention, she sneaked out and was chased. Then, Nye Tian showed up. You're lying. But after Ningxiu finished, Su Kwanga's face darkened. You're only a peak paramount god. How could you escape from the wolf slave farm? He said cold. The wolf slave farm was one of the most heavily guarded places in Wolf Night City. It was even guarded by a wolf king. Ningxiu was only a peak paramount god. There was no way she could escape from the wolf slave farm. Not to mention Ningxiu, even Su Kuanga and Nie Tian with their strength would not be able to escape after being caught and thrown into the wolf slave farm. I'm not lying. Ningxiu stared at Su Kuanga and argued for herself. Since you're not lying, then tell me, how did you escape? Su Kuanga didn't back down and asked cold. I have my own way. Ningxiu frowned as if she had something she couldn't say. What is your method? Can't you let us know? Su Kuanga frowned and continued to ask. Ningxiu's expression was ugly. She was speechless for a moment. Say no more, I believe you. At this moment, Nie Tian looked at Ningxiu and said solemnly, Let's go to the wolf slave farm now. Ningxiu was taken aback. Her eyes welled up with tears as she nodded heavily. Nie Tian, are you really going to the wolf slave farm? Do you know where that place is? Su Kuanga stepped forward and stopped Nie Tian, asking with a panicked expression. No matter how dangerous it is, I must go. Nie Tian nodded. His voice was not loud, but it was filled with determination. Duanmu Lu and the others were in the wolf slave market. He must go. All right, I'll go with you. Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and felt the firmness in the latter's eyes. In the end, he could only nod and said solemnly, Thank you. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, but he did not refuse. The wolf slave farm was a dangerous place. If Su Kuanga followed him, he would have a helper at the critical moment. All right, let's go now. Nie Tian did not delay and immediately prepared to go to the wolf slave farm. Wait a minute. But at this time, Su Kuanga suddenly spoke. He paused for a moment and hesitated for a long time before finally taking out a token and handing it over to Wenren Xiang. Wenren Xiang took the token and saw the word, Su, written on it. She could not help but be puzzled, not knowing what Su Kuanga meant. This is the Su family's inner sect token. Take it and find the person who stopped me from fighting with Yin Liujie in the restaurant. Tell him that I'm going to the wolf slave farm. Su Kuanga looked at Wenren Xiang and said solemnly, Wolf King Su Cheng? Wenren Xiang frowned. She did not expect Su Kuanga to ask her to find the Wolf King at this time. Could it be that there was some relationship between Su Kuanga and Su Cheng? Brother Su, do you know the Wolf King? Nie Tian was also stunned and could not help but ask. You go. Su Kuanga did not explain and said solemnly. This. Wenren Xiang's pretty face froze as she looked at Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded. Wenren Xiang agreed and immediately left. Nie Tian did not know the relationship between Su Kuanga and the Wolf King Su Cheng. Since Su Kuanga asked Wenren Xiang to inform Su Cheng, it was enough to prove that Su Kuanga had a certain amount of trust in Su Cheng. Then, Nie Tian and the others did not stop and immediately went to the wolf slave farm. Half a day later, they arrived at a remote place far away from the city center. Nie Tian saw from afar that there was a strange-looking castle in the open space in front of him. It was very grand, comparable to the imperial palace. Nie Tian, this is the wolf slave farm. Su Kuanga looked at the castle in the distance and said solemnly. Ningxiu slightly nodded. Coming to this place again made her a little nervous. Ningxiu, you go into the 9 superbs first. Nie Tian said and let Ningxiu hide in the 9 superbs. She could not help much anyway, and might even become a burden to Nie Tian and Su Kuanga. Then, Nie Tian and Su Kuanga walked towards the wolf slave farm. Stop. At the entrance, they were stopped by 2 guards in black. Nie Tian glanced at the 2 guards and was secretly surprised. The strength of these 2 guards were actually at the first level of the heavenly mandate realm. We are warriors participating in the Wolf Knight competition. We are just going in to take a look. Su Kuanga seemed very careful. He took out the Wolf Knight token and several top-grade sacred crystals and handed them to the 2 guards. Nie Tian also took out the Wolf Knight token and showed it to the 2 guard. You can only watch from the outside, you cannot enter the inner field, understand? the two guards said with a gloomy and cold face. Su Kwanga nodded and entered the wolf slave farm with Nye Tian. As soon as he stepped into the wolf slave field, Nye Tian sensed the smell of blood assaulting his senses. Even someone like him, who was used to seeing killings, still felt that the smell of blood was extremely unpleasant. At the same time, he felt that the entire wolf slave farm was filled with a strong aura of a boundary. It was obviously protected by a boundary. Then, the two entered the outer field of the wolf slave farm and saw a huge martial arts arena in the distance. It looked like a coliseum, and the surrounding viewing area was full of people. Nye Tian frowned. He did not expect there to be so many people here. Nye Tian, these people came from other places in the seventh sacred cultivator's world. Basically, they directly teleported here through the space-time grand formation. Most of them are from big families and forces, and they came here to play. Su Kwanga saw Nye Tian's doubts and said in a heavy voice, "These people can only stay in the wolf slave farm and are not allowed to leave. If they get tired of playing, they can teleport back through the space-time grand formation." So that's how it is. Nye Tian frowned and his face was gloomy. These people are interesting, coming all the way to the wolf slave farm to play. Nye Tian and Su Kwanga directly walked towards a martial arts arena. Chapter 35:24. Chapter 35:19. Chapter 35:19. Enter the arena in person. Nye Tian looked at the scene in the arena and could not help but frown. That's a battlefield. There's a strong barrier there, and the martial artists' Yuan meridians are completely suppressed. They can't use any martial skills, and can only use their physical bodies to resist. Su Kwanga looked at Nye Tian and said in a heavy tone, "These people have seen enough of ordinary fights. They all want to see martial artists fight like wild beasts without using martial skills." Nye Tian's eyes darkened. He used his divine sense to probe the battlefield, and sure enough, he discovered that the battlefield was enveloped by a powerful barrier. These people were really perverted. They actually liked to watch such bloody battles. On the other side, Nye Tian saw that in the other arenas, the space was even larger. The cultivators in them were fighting directly. Those arenas are all ordinary arenas. They are divided into overgod arenas, demi-saints arenas, demi-saints arenas, pseudo-saints arenas, saints arenas, and saints arenas. Su Kwanga pointed to an arena in the distance and solemnly explained, "These arenas are for ordinary martial artists to fight. Different arenas only allow martial artists with corresponding strength to participate." Are these people fighting wolf slaves? Nye Tian frowned. He saw that most of the cultivators fighting had the word slave tattooed on their faces, just like Ningxiu. Most of them are wolf slaves, but there are also a few other warriors. Su Kwanga nodded slightly and said, "There are some who are not satisfied with watching, and could also enter the arena to fight. However, they are not restricted by the arena, and even heavenly rhythm saints could enter the arena for demi-saints to fight." When Nye Tian heard what Su Kwanga said, he couldn't help but frown. His face became gloomy. If a heavenly charm holy apostle were to enter the pseudo-saint sanctuary or the demi-saint sanctuary, would that not be a massacre? Even an extreme prodigy like Nye Tian would find it difficult to fight against a heavenly charm holy disciple when he was at the pseudo-holy disciple rank. If these people want to personally participate, they have to pay a huge fee to appear. In fact, they are just spending money to kill people. Su Kwanga smiled bitterly and said, "Many people from big families like to bring their young juniors here and let them go on a killing spree in order to train their martial heart." Nye Tian's face was gloomy and he didn't say anything. Using this method to train the heart of martial arts was simply a joke. Whether one's heart of martial arts was tenacious or not had little to do with whether or not he had killed people, or how many people he had killed. Many people who were addicted to killing, when faced with someone stronger than them, would also be so frightened that their knees would weaken, and they would kneel and beg for mercy. Some people who had never killed before also had unyielding pride. After a moment, Nye Tian frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Where did so many wolf slaves come from?" Most of the wolf slaves were captured by Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf from other places in the seventh sacred world of cultivators. There are also some who came to Night Wolf Mountain and were forcibly captured as wolf slaves, Su Kuanga said in a heavy tone. Nye Tian's eyes darkened. Duanmu Lu and the others were forcibly captured as wolf slaves. Once the word slave is engraved on these wolf slaves, they are basically finished. Su Kuanga sighed and continued, "The battle between wolf slaves is basically a battle of life and death. Whether it is a battlefield or an ordinary battlefield, the weak are prey to the strong. Only the strong can survive. The best outcome for a wolf slave is to be fancied by someone and be bought. However, the price of a wolf slave is very high. Ordinary people simply cannot afford it. After all, the sacred world is so big and there are so many martial artists. There is no lack of geniuses." Nye Tian frowned and his complexion became even more gloomy. If Duanmu Lu and the others had already participated in the battle, then it would be bad. Even if Duanmu Lu and the others could keep winning, there was still a possibility that they would be bought. Damn it! Nye Tian roared in his heart and secretly blamed himself for not coming here earlier. Kill! 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 Kill him! At this time, a tsunami-like shout suddenly resounded outside the arena. Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he looked over. In the arena, a wolf slave had already been beaten to the ground and could not stand up. He covered his head with both hands and begged for mercy. Another wolf slave, watching from the side, was hesitating whether to kill him or not. He might not want to kill him, but the shouts of the crowd around him forced him to do so. If he did not do so, then he would suffer the most severe punishment and might even be killed. Don't kill me. I beg you, don't kill me." The wolf slave who had fallen to the ground was still begging for mercy, hoping that he could live. However, the other wolf slave suddenly let out a low growl, took a step forward, and punched out. The wolf slave who was begging for mercy immediately turned into a pool of blood. Good. Good. All right. Immediately, the crowd outside the martial arena erupted into a thunderous roar. Nye Tian's brows furrowed, his expression extremely unsightly. These people were almost twisted perverts. They would not be satisfied until they saw someone die. The wolf slave who had won looked at the crowd around him, his eyes slightly trembling. He was also somewhat excited, and his killing habits seemed to have been stimulated. Damned wolf slave, die. However, at this time, a deep voice rang out. Then, a martial artist in luxurious clothes appeared and landed on the arena. Su Kuanga frowned and couldn't help but exclaim, "Someone entered the arena." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and his divine sense swept towards the martial artist in luxurious clothes. This was a young martial artist, probably only about 100 years old, but his strength was already at the third step of the half-step saint realm. And the wolf slave standing in front of him was only a late-stage paramount god. Such a gap in strength was like the difference between heaven and earth. Nye Tian frowned. This martial artist in luxurious clothes was the kind of person that Su Kuanga had mentioned. He was not satisfied with watching and had personally entered the arena. However, this martial artist in luxurious clothes was obviously not restricted by the arena, and had come to the Supreme God arena with the strength of a half-step saint. What do you want?" The wolf slave clearly did not understand the situation, and did not expect that a half-step saint would suddenly appear. "Kill you!" The martial artist in luxurious clothes sneered, and then his figure moved. The wolf slave did not even have the time to react, and was directly killed, a tragic death. Good. 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 Outside the arena, there was another burst of cheers. The crowd was incomparably fanatical, and they loved to see the scene of killing. Su Kuanga shook his head and said, "Nye Tian, let's find your friend." "Okay." Nye Tian agreed, and no longer paid attention to the battle. His ability was limited, and the number of people he could save was also limited. Everyone had their own path, and he only came here to save Duanmu Lu and the others. Next, Nie Tian and Su Kuanga searched the arenas one by one. There were tens of thousands of arenas here, and Nie Tian mainly looked for the main god arena and the supreme god arena. He searched dozens of supreme god arenas, but still did not find Duanmu Lu and the others. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly sensed a familiar sword intent aura, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow. In the next moment, he followed the sword intent aura and arrived outside an arena. In the distance, he saw two martial artists standing in the arena, and they were fighting fiercely. Chapter 35:25. Chapter 35:20. Chapter 35:28 Extremities Kunwu Duanmu. Nie Tian looked at the figure on the martial arena. His pupils suddenly constricted as he cried out in alarm. He had finally found Duanmu Lu. Nie Tian, is that person your friend? Su Kuanga saw that Nie Tian's complexion suddenly changed. Following the latter's gaze, he saw Duanmu Lu and asked in a deep voice. Yes. Nie Tian nodded and said, I want to save him. Nie Tian, don't be impulsive. This is the wolf slave field, there are many strong warriors here. Su Kuanga noticed that Nie Tian was somewhat excited and nervously said. In the entire wolf slave farm, there were countless Tianyan cultivators, as well as many heavenly mandate cultivators. There were even many shadow guards and a wolf king standing guard. If Nie Tian wanted to rescue them by force, it would be impossible. Nie Tian nodded, his eyebrows furrowed. He was very anxious, but he still maintained his calm. If he forcefully made a move, the chance of saving Duanmu Lu was very small. More importantly, he only saw Duanmu Lu. He did not see any other disciples. Nie Tian's gaze was low as he locked his attention onto the arena. Duanmu Lu was fighting a wolf slave who was on the same level as Duanmu Lu, a peak paramount god. At this time, Nie Tian could only hope that Duanmu Lu would win this match. This was because a battle between wolf slaves was a battle of life and death. Therefore, between Duanmu Lu and his opponent, only one of them could survive. Kill. At this time, the wolf slave growled and struck out with his palm. A terrifying wave of air appeared in the void, rolling like the sea. Like a raging wild beast, it pressed towards Duanmu Lu. Obviously, this wolf slave had been a peak paramount god for a long time, which explained why he was so much stronger than Duanmu Lu. Although Duanmu Lu was a peak paramount god, and on the verge of breaking through to the half-sage level, he had only reached that level with the help of Nie Tian. Most importantly, as a peak paramount god, he didn't have any real fighting experience. Therefore, it would be a bit of a stretch for him to actually fight. Buzz. In the martial arts arena, a heavy sword appeared in Duanmu Lu's hand. It was his Yuan Ling sword, the 8 extremities Kunwu. A low sword hum sounded, and the sword will was released. It surged out, and the majestic sword shadow whistled in the air with a domineering aura. Boom! In the next moment, the two forces collided, and a low rumbling sound came from the void. Bang! Bang! Duanmu Lu and the wolf slave both retreated at the same time due to the impact of the terrifying power. After that, they both unleashed a few more moves, and were evenly matched. Nie Tian's brow was furrowed, and he looked even more nervous than when he was fighting on his own. However, he could tell that Duanmu Lu was very smart. He was intentionally holding back his strength, hoping to familiarize himself with his opponent. I'm going to take your life with my next fist strike, you son of a bitch. At this moment, the wolf slave seemed to be enraged. With a roar, he punched out. The violent force of the punch blasted out and actually condensed into a storm in the void, strangling towards Duanmu Lu. This is the end, Yang Qi said. Duanmu Lu's expression darkened, but he didn't seem the least bit afraid. Mouth twisting into a cold smile, he unleashed the power of the 8 extremities Kunwu sword will. Rumble! In the next moment, the terrifying sword will converged, and a terrifying sword projection appeared. Sword light spread out for tens of thousands of meters, filled with killing intent. How is this possible? The wolf slave suddenly felt the terrifying suppressive power and couldn't help but cry out. He obviously didn't expect that Duanmu Lu could burst out such a terrifying power in an instant. Then, the wolf slave didn't have time to react and was directly submerged by the sword projection. Not even his bones were left. Good. 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 The crowd looked at the bloody scene and let out hysterical roars, extremely fanatical. However, Nie Tian frowned, and his face didn't relax at all. Duanmu Lu won this battle, but it only meant that he was temporarily safe. However, no one knew what kind of enemy he would encounter next. Teacher! At this moment, Duanmu Lu suddenly raised his head and saw Nie Tian. His eyes trembled with surprise. He never expected that Nie Tian would come. Yes, Nie Tian looked at Duanmu Lu and nodded, his eyes firm and calm. Damn wolf slave, your strength isn't bad. Let this young master have a taste of it. At this moment, a low and murderous voice suddenly sounded out from the sky, and then a figure descended from the sky and descended heavily onto the arena. Huh! Nie Tian's eyes suddenly sank, and his expression suddenly changed. The figure that suddenly appeared on the mountain of the arena turned out to be the young martial artist in luxurious clothes. Not too long ago, he had killed a peak paramount god wolf slave. Oh no! Su Quanga's eyes trembled when he saw that person, and he cried out in alarm. The martial artist in luxurious clothes was not a wolf slave, so he wasn't restricted by the martial arts arena. That person was a third-stage half-saint, but he could appear in the paramount god martial arena. With Duanmu Lu's strength, it was impossible for him to fight against this martial artist in luxurious clothes. Nie Tian, calm down. Su Quanga felt that something was wrong with Nie Tian's eyes, so he quickly stepped forward, pulled the ladder, and said, "Don't make a move unless it's absolutely necessary." Nie Tian's posture clearly showed that he wanted to directly intervene in the battle of the arena, which was a taboo of the wolf slave farm. There was once a disciple of an aristocratic family who rashly intervened in the battle of the arena, and was directly killed by the people of the wolf slave farm. In the wolf slave farm, no matter who you were, you must abide by the rules. Nie Tian's face was gloomy, and his eyes were locked on the martial artist in luxurious clothes. If Duanmu Lu was in danger, he would definitely intervene. Even if he angered the entire wolf slave farm, he didn't care. Su Quanga frowned and looked around, obviously waiting for someone. He was waiting for Wolf King Su Qing, and if the latter was willing to come, perhaps there would be a turning point. Boy, you're a good swordsman, and very talented. On the arena, the martial artist in luxurious clothes stared coldly at Duanmu Lu, like a wolf staring at a little sheep, and said with a cold smile, "This young master likes to kill geniuses, especially young geniuses like you. Make your move." Duanmu Lu's face was gloomy, without the slightest fear, and responded cold. "Your bones are very hard." The martial artist in luxurious clothes smiled cold and said, "I just don't know if your bones are harder, or this young master's fist is harder." Boom! The moment his voice fell, his figure directly moved, and his whole body's imposing aura soared to the extreme in an instant. He blasted out a punch, and where his fist landed, a fist shadow whizzed out like a mad dragon, blasting towards Duanmu Lu. Chapter 35-26. The Final Sword. The scene in the arena caused Nie Tian's eyes to narrow, and his heart to rise to his throat. The man in the luxurious robes was very young, and was a third-step half-saint. He was definitely a genius in the martial Tao. Although Duanmu Lu was also a genius, he was only a peak paramount god. The gap between the two of them was simply too great. How could a puny ant like you possibly stand up to me? In the dueling ring, the cultivator in splendid clothes was very arrogant. He did not care about Duanmu Lu at all. he roared wildly and arrogantly. As for Duanmu, his expression was grim, and he didn't say a single word. Bang! In the next moment, two terrifying forces collided with each other. A deep rumbling sound came from the void. A figure was sent flying by the impact of the violent force. Duanmu! Nie Tian exclaimed when he saw the figure that had been sent flying backward. It was none other than Duanmu. Duanmu staggered backward a few hundred meters before coming to a steady stop. However, there was a terrifying wound on his body. Blood gushed out and dyed half of his body red. The martial artist in luxurious clothes was too strong. That kind of frightening impact almost made the sword in his hand fall out of his hand. The man in the luxurious robes wasn't smiling at Duanmu, but rather astonishment. What? He had never imagined that Duanmu would survive his attack. Moments ago, he had killed a peak paramount god wolf slave with a single punch. He had assumed that Duanmu wasn't much stronger than that wolf slave, but now it seemed he had underestimated Duanmu. Nie Tian's eyes flickered when he saw that Duanmu had stopped moving, and he calmed down a bit. It seems I've underestimated you, boy. At this time, the well-dressed martial artist smiled cold and said, "But it doesn't matter. You will die all the same." As his voice faded, he attacked once again. The aura around his body had actually increased by a lot compared to before. Waves of frightening killing force surged wildly outside his body like a storm. The tearing force impacted the void, as if it wanted to forcefully tear the space apart. Really? Duanmu's eyes were gloomy and cold. Immediately, the eight extremities Kunwu sword let out a low and vigorous sword hum, and then a terrifying sword intent was released, causing the sword momentum of his entire body to skyrocket. Ba Ji sword seal. When Nie Tian saw this, his eyes trembled and he was shocked. At this moment, Duanmu had activated the 8 extreme sword seal. It looked like he was going to fight to the death with that cultivator in splendid clothes. Amazing! Su Quanga's eyes also trembled, he was shocked. The fact that Duanmu, at such a young age, had the power of a peak paramount god, and could fight a third-step half-sage was a shocking display of latent talent. The moment the Ba Ji sword seal was activated, the terrifying sword momentum stunned the cultivator in splendid clothes. Obviously, he didn't expect that Duanmu would have such a powerful trump card. This kid, what a strong sword intent! The people outside the arena were also shocked, their eyes trembling as they looked at Duanmu. Kill! At this time, the cultivator in splendid clothes attacked again. A violent force swept through the void like a black cage, enveloping Duanmu. Kill! Duanmu let out a low roar as well, and the sword will around him exploded to the extreme in an instant. A majestic aura covered the sky and earth, condensing into a terrifying sword shadow in the air as if it wanted to destroy everything. Boom! The two terrible forces collided head-on, the void exploded with a roar, and then the wild force surged in all directions, rolling like a killing machine. Bang! With a muffled sound, Duanmu was once again sent flying, leaving a bloody trail in the air. But once again, he stood firm. Although he was covered in blood, his aura was still stable, and his sword intent was incomparably sharp. The cultivator in splendid clothes trembled, and the surprise in his eyes turned into shock. Duanmu's strength was far beyond what he had expected, and yet he was still standing. Duanmu! Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and his face was incomparably gloomy. He could see that Duanmu was about to reach his limit. Well done, kid! The cultivator in splendid clothes said coldly, his eyes filled with killing intent. You deserve to be taken seriously. I won't lose to you, Duanmu said in a deep voice, his eyes filled with unswerving determination. Then, his body suddenly trembled, and the surging blood in his body suddenly surged and poured into the Ba Ji Kunwu sword. You're about to die, and you still want to be so stubborn? The cultivator in splendid clothes sneered, his eyes extremely cold. In his opinion, Duanmu was just a wolf slave, an ant-like existence, and should have been killed by him. Duanmu's desperate resistance only made this slaughter more enjoyable for him. The last sword, Duanmu said coldly, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile, and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He had always been a quiet swordsman, and rarely revealed his true killing intent. But now, facing this cultivator in splendid clothes, he could no longer control the killing intent in his heart. "Kid, do you still want to kill me?" Sensing Duanmu's killing intent, the cultivator in splendid clothes sneered and said arrogantly, "You're just a superior god martial artist, and you want to kill a half-step saint? You're dreaming." "Who said I'm a superior god martial artist?" Duanmu smiled cold, and his eyes trembled strangely. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying aura erupted from his body, surging violently into the sky. He broke through. Nie Tian's eyes trembled when he saw this scene, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He didn't expect that Duanmu would break through at this time. Back in Forest Wolf City, Duanmu showed signs of breaking through after a few days of cultivation, so it was not surprising that he broke through at this time. However, Duanmu was very smart. He was clearly using the cultivator in splendid clothes to maximize the power of his martial body, and then break through in one fell swoop. This kid, he broke through. The crowd also noticed Duanmu's abnormality, and shouted in shock. It was hard to imagine that a wolf slave could break through under such circumstances. How is this possible? The cultivator in splendid clothes felt that Duanmu's aura had instantly skyrocketed several times, and he couldn't help but tremble and shout in horror. "Die!" At this time, the corner of Duanmu's mouth twitched, and he spat out a cold word. Then, his whole body's sword intent erupted violently, and the 8 extremities Kunwu swept out. The majestic sword shadow was like a raging dragon, sweeping everything and blasting toward the cultivator in splendid clothes. "You!" The cultivator in splendid clothes trembled, and he shouted in horror. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. At this moment, he felt the real aura of death. For the first time, he felt the threat of death. Chapter 35:27. Chapter 35:22. Chapter 35:22 8 Direction Order. In the sky above the martial arts arena, a figure suddenly appeared, staring coldly at Duanmu. "Die!" His eyes suddenly trembled, and then with a low roar, he directly attacked Duanmu. Boom! However, Duanmu was not the slightest bit afraid. He completely disregarded it, and the violent sword shadow rushed towards the martial artist. In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and the air was filled with blood. The martial artist did not even have the time to scream before he died. Even in death, he did not believe that the person he wanted to kill was actually so terrifying. Boom! At the same time, a terrifying palm shadow appeared in the air, like a curtain that covered the sky. It carried a powerful killing intent, and it rushed towards Duanmu. Duanmu's eyes trembled, and he suddenly felt a terrifying pressure covering the sky and earth, as if it was going to tear his martial body apart. This kind of terrifying power made him despair. It was not something he could contend against. Boom! At the moment of life and death, a sword shadow appeared in the air, and a violent power swept across everything, directly shattering the palm shadow. Following that, a silver-haired figure appeared in the sky above the martial arts arena. It was Nie Tian. "Teacher!" Duanmu suddenly raised his head, and when he saw Nie Tian's figure, his eyes burned with excitement as he shouted in surprise. "Duanmu, are you all right?" Nie Tian looked at Duanmu and asked calmly. "I'm fine." Duanmu nodded and forced a smile. Although he was seriously injured, it was fortunate that he was not in danger. What's going on? When the crowd saw the scene on the martial arts arena, they were all stunned, and their expressions were filled with shock. In that instant it was too chaotic, and no one could react for a moment. No one had expected that Duanmu Lu would explode with such a terrifying power in an instant, and directly kill the martial artist. What was even more unexpected was that there were actually two martial warriors that attacked at almost the same time, interfering in the battle in the arena. The person who made the first move clearly wanted to save the martial artist in luxurious clothes, but he failed. The silver-haired cultivator successfully blocked that person's attack and saved Duanmu Lu. What happened next was serious. No matter what the reason was, these two people had violated the rules of the wolf slave farm. Now, it was up to the people of the wolf slave farm to deal with the current situation. "You two, how dare you!" At this moment, a deep and sinister voice rang out. Immediately after, a figure dressed in black appeared. His sinister eyes stared at Nye Tian and the other cultivator coldly. Boom! 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 Just as his voice fell, a violent aura appeared in the surrounding void. Dozens of black-clothed cultivators appeared around the arena. Each of them wore black robes that covered their faces. Their auras were powerful. They were the dark guards of the wolf slave farm. When Nye Tian heard that person's voice, he couldn't help but frown. His expression changed slightly. He turned around and saw a face that made him stunned. It was actually him. The person he saw at this moment turned out to be the judge who had arranged the battle between Sun Wolf City and Song Lang City not long ago, the wolf slave commander who had given him the Wolf Knight order. "It's you, Nye Tian." The wolf slave commander's eyes trembled when he saw Nye Tian, and he exclaimed in surprise. "These two know each other?" The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. It turned out that Nye Tian and the wolf slave commander of the wolf slave farm knew each other. In the next moment, the crowd couldn't help but look at the other martial warrior with sympathy. This person was the first to interfere in the battle in the arena. Moreover, Nye Tian and the wolf slave knew each other. He was probably out of luck. However, this person was not afraid at all. His pair of gloomy eyes stared at Nye Tian, looking like a wild beast that wanted to devour someone. "The two of you should know that the rules of the wolf slave farm forbid outsiders from interfering in a battle." At this moment, the wolf slave commander looked at Nye Tian with a strange light in his eyes. Then, his face sank and he said in a cold tone, "I know." Nye Tian nodded slightly, then he looked at the other person and said, "He was the one who interfered first." "So what if he interfered?" That person smiled coldly. His expression was incomparably stern and insolent, as if he didn't care about the wolf slave farm at all. "Your tone is really arrogant." The wolf slave commander's eyes sank as he locked his gaze on that person cold. Dozens of wolf slave farm hidden guards also locked their auras on that person. This person was so arrogant that he was clearly provoking the wolf slave farm. If the wolf slave commander didn't do anything at this moment, the wolf slave farm would lose its face. That person sneered and immediately took out a token. He looked at the wolf slave commander and said, "Can I interfere now?" "This is..." The wolf slave commander's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he saw the token. His expression became sluggish and he said in a trembling voice, Eight directions token. Omniscient order." When the crowd heard this name, their eyes trembled. They looked at the badge in astonishment, as if they had just seen something terrifying. Who would have thought that this person actually had an 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's 8 Paths token? The 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce was equally as famous as the 1,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. They were one of the largest chambers of commerce in the all-heaven sacred world. The 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's influence was spread all over the all-heavens sacred world. It had a branch in almost every sacred world. The octagonal token that this person took out should be a branch token. But even so, this token represented too many things. After all, the Wolf Slave Field and Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf were just local snakes in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. On the other hand, The 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce was a truly powerful dragon that they could not afford to offend. So your excellency is from 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. After a while, Wolf C spoke, but his expression had clearly changed. It was somewhat unsightly, and even his voice was trembling. 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce? Nye Tian narrowed his eyes, wondering which was stronger, this Chamber of Commerce or 10,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. Since Wolf C was so afraid of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, he should also be afraid of 10,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce. If he knew that one of the wolf slaves they had captured not long ago belonged to 10,000 Treasures Chamber of Commerce, his expression would certainly not be good. I am from the 7 Cultivators Chamber of Commerce branch of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. My name is Shun Han. Shun Han put away the 8 Paths token and said in a cold voice, the one who died in the arena just now was the youngest son of 7 Cultivators branch president Shen Mubai, Shen Zhanfang. This. Wolf C could not help frowning when he heard Shun Han's words, his expression changing dramatically as he was filled with shock. It turned out that the person who died in the arena just now had such a noble identity. No wonder Shun Han ignored the rules of the arena and directly saved him. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Shen Zhanfang had died under Duanmu Lu's sword. Senior Shun Han, this was an accident. After a while, Wolf C calmed down and said, young Master Shen entered the arena himself and unfortunately died in the hands of a wolf slave. This is not the fault of our wolf slave field. Chapter 35-28. Who dared to touch him? Shen Han's eyes were filled with killing intent, as if he wished he could skin Nye Tian alive. Duanmu Lu killed Shen Zhanfang, so of course he had to die, but since Nye Tian tried to stop him, he had to die as well. That wolf slave killed young Master Shen, so of course he has to die. Lang Si frowned and said with an ugly expression, but Nye Tian only tried to stop him, there's no need for him to die. To Nye Tian's surprise, Lang Si was actually pleading for him. He must die. Shun Han's face was gloomy as he stared at Nye Tian like a wolf, his words filled with killing intent. Nye Tian stopping him from killing Duanmu Lu made his hatred for Nye Tian even greater than Duanmu Lu's. This. Lang Si looked embarrassed and hesitated. Old thing, think carefully. No matter how strong your evil moon Tianlang is, it's just a force from the 7th sacred world of cultivators. If you anger our 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, I guarantee that your evil moon Tianlang will be removed from the 7th sacred world of cultivators. Seeing Lang Si hesitate, Shen Han bluntly said, what relationship would the latter have with Nye Tian in the future? Lang Si frowned and his expression became even uglier. He knew that Shen Han was right. Evil Moon Tianlang was a peak force in the entire 7th sacred world of cultivators, but it was nothing in the all-heaven sacred world. Evil Moon Tianlang was not afraid of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's 7th cultivators branch, but if 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce's elders came forward, it would be a great threat to all of Evil Moon Tianlang. 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce might not make a big fuss over a small branch, but if things really got out of hand, 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce would not sit idly by. For a moment, Lang Si was caught in a dilemma. He wanted to protect Nye Tian, not because he wanted to save Nye Tian, but because of the power in the latter's body. Moreover, he knew that Nye Tian was the Lord of the Sky. The 5 forces behind Heart of the Sky might not be as strong as 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce individually, but when they joined forces, they were no weaker than 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. There were too many secrets on Nye Tian, causing Wolf C to hesitate. Old bastard, I order you to kill this brat and that wolf slave. At this time, Shun Han was already impatient and said coldly. Wolf C's eyes darkened as he said, men, kill that wolf slave and capture Nye Tian. Yes. A shadow guard stepped forward and answered. Then, his figure moved and directly rushed towards Duanmu Lu. Who dares touch him? Right at this moment, Nye Tian took a step forth and roared out as a terrifying sword intent burst forth, slamming into the void with a sharp and forceful force. The Shadow Guard felt the fluctuation of sword intent in the air and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He then looked at Nye Tian and said in a cold tone, "Brat, scram for me. The one who should scram is you." Nye Tian's eyes suddenly turned cold as he released his aura madly, forcing the Shadow Guard to retreat again and again. How could this be? The Shadow Guard steadied himself as his eyes widened in surprise. He was a 7th layer Heavenly Yun cultivator, while Nye Tian was obviously only at the 2nd layer, yet he was able to force him back with just his aura. It was incredible. "If you take half a step closer, you'll die." Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he said coldly, "Smelly brat, you court death." The Shadow Guard's eyes darkened as he roared angrily, his aura surging madly as he prepared to attack. "Stand down." But at this moment, Wolf C's voice suddenly rang out and he growled, "Sir Wolf C." The Shadow Guard was taken aback as he bowed slightly to Wolf C, not knowing what was going on. "You're not his opponent." Wolf C's face was gloomy as he motioned for the Shadow Guard to stand down. The Shadow Guard was stunned for a moment as he was puzzled, but he still retreated. He couldn't understand why Wolf C would say that he wasn't Nye Tian's opponent when he was a 7th layer Heavenly Yun cultivator. Could this 2nd layer Heavenly Yun cultivator really be stronger than him? Wolf C was right. He knew Nye Tian's strength better than anyone else. He had seen Nye Tian defeat Ming Tai and Su Kuanga with his own eyes. At that time, Nye Tian's strength was only at the 1st layer Heavenly Yun. But now, in just a few days, Nye Tian had miraculously broken through to the 2nd layer Heavenly Yun. There was no doubt that the current Nye Tian was even stronger than before. "Old thing, what do you mean by this?" Shin Han's face darkened as he looked at Wolf C and questioned. "Sir, please calm down." Wolf C suppressed the anger in his heart as he replied. He then looked at Nye Tian and asked, "Nye Tian, must you save this wolf slave?" Nye Tian nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "Nye Tian, do you know how many experts there are in this entire wolf slave farm?" Wolf C's eyes narrowed as he asked Nye Tian in a cold voice. "Whoever dares to touch him will have to do it over my dead body." Nye Tian's face was gloomy and his eyes didn't fluctuate much. "Brat, do you think you can stop so many Shadow Guards?" Shin Han sneered and asked in a loud voice. "You can try first." Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he looked at Shin Han provocatively. Shin Han's face darkened and he was speechless. He looked at Nye Tian with fear in his eyes. His strength was at the 5th layer of Heavenly Yun, much higher than Nye Tian, but he felt a strong threat from Nye Tian. Moreover, he saw with his own eyes that the 7th layer Heavenly Yun Shadow Guard was forced back by Nye Tian's aura. He even suspected that Nye Tian could kill him in one move. "Nye Tian, you can't stop everyone." Wolf C frowned before turning to Duanmu Lu and saying solemnly, "As long as this wolf slave dies, there is still room to turn things around. With your identity, at least you won't have to die." He believed that Nye Tian must have something on him that could prove his identity, it was just that he hadn't taken it out yet. As long as he publicly admitted that he was the Lord of the Sky, even 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce wouldn't dare do anything to him. However, Nye Tian didn't seem to have any intention of admitting his identity. The Lord of the Sky was related to the 5 super forces, so even if Wolf C knew something, he didn't dare say it out loud. "If you want to act, just give the order, no more nonsense," Nye Tianling responded coldly, his expression cold and indifferent. "Nye Tian, you're forcing this Wolf C's hand." Wolf C's eyes sank as he growled. "Let's do it," Nye Tian said with a grim expression. Wolf C's eyes were extremely gloomy and his expression was gloomy. After hesitating for a long time, he finally spat out 2 words, "Do it!" Yes. The several dozen wolf slave field shadow guards roared at the same time, their momentum as heavy as a mountain. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the next moment, the momentum of the several dozen shadow guards skyrocketed at the same time, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Suddenly, an endless oppressive force crashed down on Nye Tian like a raging wave. Oh no! Su Kuangji's eyes trembled when he saw this scene and cried out in horror. In the blink of an eye, he moved to help Nye Tian. Stop! But at that moment, a low voice suddenly sounded out. Then, a figure appeared in the air above the martial arena, standing there like a mountain. "HM?" Nye Tian frowned as he stared at the figure, his eyes trembling as he called out in surprise, "It's him! Second uncle!" At the same time, Su Kuangji's eyes trembled as he stared at the newcomer and shouted in his heart. Chapter 35-29. Heaven-piercing wolf. Second uncle? Su Kuanggu stared at Wolf King Su Qing and actually called him second uncle. The two of them were actually uncle and nephew. Asterisk Hong. Asterisk the moment Su Cheng's figure landed, his whole body released a surging imposing aura, forcibly blocking the joint oppression of the dozens of wolf-slave field secret guards. The void rumbled and the two imposing auras collapsed with a loud bang. This! Everyone's eyes trembled as they exclaimed in surprise. All eyes were focused on Su Qing. Sir Wolf King. Lang Si reacted at this time, and after seeing Su Qing, his eyes could not help trembling as he called out in shock. His figure flickered and he arrived beside Su Qing, bowing slightly in a cautious manner. As the Wolf King, Su Cheng's aura was extremely powerful, and just by standing there, he gave off a great sense of oppression. "What's going on here?" Su Qing asked Lang Si cold. "Reporting to Sir, this person is called Nye Tian. He violated the rules of the wolf-slave field and openly intervened in a battle in the martial arena." Lang Si was very cautious as he glanced over at Nye Tian and said simply, "Is that all?" Su Qing frowned and immediately turned his eyes to Shun Han, asking, "Who is this person?" "My name is Shun Han, a member of Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce." Without waiting for Lang Si to answer, Shun Han spoke directly with a very arrogant look on his face, not even putting Su Qing in his eyes. Although his strength was far inferior to Su Qing's, he was a member of Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce, so with this identity, he felt his status was above Su Qing's. Su Qing frowned and his expression instantly became gloomy. "Sir," at this time, Lang Si lowered his voice and explained what had just happened to Su Qing. "So, you acted first," Su Qing looked at Shun Han cold and said after listening. "So what?" Shun Han showed no fear and said arrogantly, "I was trying to save my young master. My young master died in the wolf-slave field. Shouldn't your wolf-slave field give my Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce an explanation?" "Explanation?" Su Qing sneered and said. "He took the initiative to enter the martial arena. Whether he lived or died was his own choice. You openly intervening in a battle is a provocation to the wolf-slave field." Shun Han frowned and his face darkened. He didn't expect Su Qing to be so domineering. He asked, "What do you mean by that?" "You don't need to use Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce to pressure me. You are just a member of a branch of Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce. If things really get out of hand, Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce may not intervene." Su Qing replied calmly, "Don't you chambers of commerce like to make peace and keep the peace?" "You." Shun Han's face darkened. He was speechless. At this moment, the crowd was also stunned. They looked at Su Qing in shock. Su Qing appeared calm on the surface, but in fact, he was very tough and did not even put Eight Paths Chamber of Commerce in his eyes. "What are you going to do?" After a while, Shun Han said cold, "Could it be that our young master has died just like that? Nye Tian is not a member of the wolf-slave field. He violated the rules of the wolf-slave field, and will be dealt with by our wolf-slave field. It's not your place to intervene." Su Cheng's face was gloomy as his eyes swept over Nye Tian before landing on Duanmulu and saying, "As for this wolf-slave, He didn't do anything wrong. Since he was able to kill the Chun family's young master, it proves that he is a valuable wolf slave. HM? Shin Han heard Su Cheng's words and frowned, asking coldly, "Do you want to just let this go? Our 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce. Don't mention 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce to me again." Before Shin Han could finish, Su Cheng's face suddenly sank and he interrupted him directly. "You can't speak on behalf of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce." Shin Han's eyes trembled as he felt Su Cheng's anger. Obviously frightened, he subconsciously took a few steps back. "Nye Tian, you want to save this wolf slave, don't you?" At this time, Su Cheng no longer paid attention to Shin Han and asked Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "All right, I'll give you a chance." Su Cheng looked at Nye Tian and seemed to hesitate for a moment before saying, "Challenge the Heavenly Wolf. If you win, not only can you avoid the punishment of the wolf slave arena, you can also take this wolf slave away." Heavenly Wolf. When everyone heard these words, their eyes couldn't help trembling as they exclaimed in unison. Unexpectedly, the opportunity Su Cheng gave Nye Tian was actually to challenge the Heavenly Wolf. Challenging the Heavenly Wolf had not happened in the wolf slave arena for a long time. Heavenly Wolf? Nye Tian frowned and couldn't help asking, "What does that mean?" Heavenly Wolf means that you accept a challenge from anyone in the wolf slave arena. If you can win 100 matches in a row or remain undefeated for 5 days, you win. Su Cheng's eyes flashed strangely as he said coldly, "Accept a challenge from anyone?" Nye Tian frowned and said, "Don't tell me that an expert like the Wolf King can also challenge me?" "Of course not." Su Cheng's mouth twitched and said, "Your strength is at the 2nd level of Heavenly Rhythm Holy Disciple, so your Heavenly Wolf challenge will be in the Holy Disciple arena. Only Holy Disciples or warriors below the Holy Disciple level can challenge you." "Alright." Nye Tian frowned and immediately understood. He smiled faintly and happily agreed. His current strength was almost invincible in the Heavenly Rhythm realm. Even Su Kuanga, who was at the peak of the 9th level of Heavenly Rhythm realm, lost to him. It seemed that challenging the Heavenly Wolf was not difficult for him. "Nye Tian, challenging the Heavenly Wolf is not as easy as you think. You will soon find out what kind of opponent you will face." Su Cheng smiled and said with a gloomy look, "I am not afraid of anyone below the Heavenly Mandate Saint Master." Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he said indifferently. His voice was calm, but it was filled with a domineering and sharp aura. "Boy, you talk big." Shin Han sneered at this moment, his face gloomy and murderous. He absolutely did not believe that Nye Tian could successfully challenge the Heavenly Wolf, because challenging the Heavenly Wolf was definitely not as easy as Su Cheng made it out to be. The opponent Nye Tian would face would be beyond his imagination. "This is how I will deal with it." At this time, Su Cheng looked at Shin Han and said, "If Nye Tian loses, he will die. I'll leave the wolf slave to you. If Nye Tian wins, don't complain." "Alright." Shin Han sneered and said, "Sir Wolf King, it seems that you are still very afraid of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce." In his opinion, Su Cheng letting Nye Tian challenge the Heavenly Wolf was equivalent to letting Nye Tian die. Victory or defeat is uncertain, don't be happy too early. Su Cheng glanced at Shin Han and smiled faintly, a strange light flashing across his eyes. Then, he looked at Nye Tian and said, "Nye Tian, get ready, we will begin immediately."